then gravel. Yeah.
Okay, so no, that's not the. Maybe they turn it on themselves. Yeah.
It is on already. Yes. You just need to speak, and the operator will adapt the volume.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and the representatives of the world's indigenous peoples and the local communities. I would like to call the meeting to order. I invite delegates to take their seats. Distinguished delegates, in my capacity as a representative of the President of the Conference of the Parties, I have the pleasure to chairing this meeting.
Microphones aren't working, or the.
Well, let's see. Maybe continue.
Continue. I'm pleased to welcome you to the 12th meeting of the ad hoc, open-ended intersessional working group on Article 8J and related provisions. It gave me great pleasure to invite Mr. Kenneth Deere to come to the podium to offer us a traditional indigenous opening. Dr. Deere is from the Bear clan of the Mohawk Nation of the Kanawak Territory. Okay, thank you. Welcome, Mr. Deere, to chair this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for welcoming us. Are the microphones working? Okay, good. It's absolutely an honor to be invited to open this meeting. My name is Kenneth Deere. Zahayandu is the name in my language. It means the fire still burns. And I'm of the Bear clan. We are a matrilineal society. So my mother is Bear clan, so therefore I am Bear clan. All of our leadership is all appointed by women. It's with the authority and the power of the women that I have this authority to speak to you and address you. I'm a Mohawk, also known as Ganyangahaga in my language, and we are part of what people know as the Iroquois Confederacy, or the Six Nations Confederacy, but we call ourselves the Haudenosaunee. And in our traditions from time immemorial is that when we all gather together and we have to make decisions of great importance, we always take into consideration all of creation before we begin our deliberations. And these words have been said from time immemorial. They are called the words that come before all others. And they begin right from the beginning when acknowledging the very earth that we walk upon. We look at the earth and all the stones and everything, the mountains, the plains, all of this area that we walk on, all has a spirit. And that we have to acknowledge that spirit that we live on. Some of us call it Mother Earth. And so we have to give thanks to that, for the duty and the responsibility that Mother Earth has for us. And we give thanks for that. And then we also have to give thanks to all the things that grow from Mother Earth, from the earth, and all the plants, and particularly the medicines that come up, the natural medicines that are a gift to us, and that we use for our good health. And we give thanks to the creation that we have all of these medicines and all of those that come up from the earth. And we give thanks for that. And also for all the food that comes up from the earth. In our case, we are people of the corn, and that we give what we call the three sisters, the corn, the beans, and the squash, that nourish our people and that we grow from the earth. And all the other plants that come up, the strawberries and the raspberries, and all of those things that give us sustenance we give thanks to. And all of you, around the world, you also have your own plants, your own medicines, your own things that grow from the earth that sustain you. And so we give thanks to the creation for all of those things that are given to us. And then we also give thanks to the larger things that grow from the earth, and that's the trees that cleanse our air, the trees that also feed our people. We give thanks to the maple tree, what we call the grandfather of all trees, that give us the first harvest in the spring of maple, with the syrup, the sap that comes from the tree, and that we use to make maple syrup, and that sweetens our food. And all the other trees that have a responsibility in the earth, the birch and the pine, and all of these trees, that we give thanks to them for the purpose that they live for, and how they warm our homes. We give thanks to the trees. And then we look at the animals. We look at the small animals on the earth. And we look at the squirrels and the foxes and the rabbits and the raccoons and all of those small animals that serve a purpose in life. And that we give thanks to the creation for these animals which serve a purpose, and which sometimes we use also for our own purposes, whether it be sustenance or others or other useful things that they give to us. So we give thanks to creation for the smaller animals. And then we look at the larger ones, what we call the four-legged animals like the deer, the moose, the bear, the caribou, and all the other animals that we give thanks for. All of you around the world, you have your own animals that you want to that serve a purpose in your life, and the horses and the cows, and all of these that serve a purpose. We give thanks to creation for them, for what their purpose is, whatever that purpose may be, whether it be to sustain us, whether to give us clothing or tools. We give thanks to the larger animals for their purpose in life. And then after that, we look into the waters, and we look into the fish, and all those creatures that swim in the water, and all of those things that have a purpose, the trout, the salmon, the eel, the turtles, the frogs, all of those things that swim in the water, that have a purpose in life. And whatever that purpose may be, we give thanks, whether it be to sustain us, to sustain our living, or even why their beauty for us to observe them. We give thanks to all those things that swim in the waters for the purpose in creation that they have. And then we look to our feathered friends, the birds that fly, the birds that sing in the morning, that give us so much pleasure. We give thanks to the birds and to the larger feathered friends like the duck and the geese and the swans and all of those feathered friends that all of us know in our own country that serve a purpose. And we give thanks for those feathered friends. And in particular, the eagle, which to us is that connection between us and the sky world that serves a purpose and also helps bring the messages that we want to give to those that we believe in. And then after that, we give thanks to the four winds, for the four winds have a purpose, and they bring us the rain that replenishes our streams, our rivers, and our lakes, and also brings lightning, and to the thunderers that purify the air, and that the wind also takes the clouds away so that we can have the sun and the warmth, so that our fields and we are warm, and that our crops can grow. So we give thanks to the four winds for the important work that they do. And then we look to the sky, and we look at the stars at night, and we look to guide us at night, so we don't get lost. We know where we are and where we are going. And also the stars also represent where we go when we pass on. And we no longer have life here, and our spirit goes somewhere else. And we believe that's where our spirits go, somewhere out there in the great mystery, that the stars represent where we will go when we are no longer here. So we give thanks to the stars and for the purpose that they serve. And then there's the moon. And the moon has a very special relationship with our women. And the moon not only gives us light at night, but it also has a relationship with the cycle of our women. And there's that close relationship with the moon, and that we appreciate the moon, and it controls the tides and many other things that maybe we don't always understand. So we give thanks to the moon for the purpose that it serves in our life. And then there's the sun. And with the sun, there would be no life, and that we give thanks to the sun. And we also look at the sun as probably a superior being, and that it could, because without the sun, we would not be here. And so we give thanks to the sun for the warmth that it gives us and the seasons that we have. So we give thanks to that very, very important element in our life. So now that we've looked at all of those things that affect us, and all those things in creation, the earth, the plants, the animals, you know, and the moon and the sun, we also have to, and their role in creation, and now we have to look at ourselves as human beings, because we are also part of creation, and we all have a purpose here in life. And we try to understand the purpose of the animals and the fish and the birds. We try to understand them, but we also have to understand what is our role in creation, and how we fit in creation, and how we're supposed to live together, and go on and exist from now and all into the future. So when we meet here to talk about the biodiversity of our lives, of the earth, we also look at the biodiversity of the human being and our role in protecting all of the biodiversity. And so when we make our deliberations here over the next 5 days, keep your consideration all of creation, because you have a duty and a role to protect that biodiversity. Just as the biodiversity helps and protects you, you keep that in mind. And all of us have a lifelong journey to find out what our role is in creation, and what that role would be. That's our destiny. That's every individual in this life has a role in creation. And it's your duty to find out what that role is from the time you are born until the time you die. So with these words, and with these instructions to keep all of creation in mind in your deliberations, I open this meeting for the next 5 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Deere. I extend my gratitude to all the indigenous people and the local community representatives attending this meeting. Distinguished delegates, first and foremost, I would like to thank Mr. Kenneth Deere and other representatives of indigenous people and the local communities for welcoming and offering us this blessing as we convene here today for this meeting. My gratitude also goes to the Swiss government for the support to this conference. During the past 2 days, we had the international dialogue with indigenous peoples and the local communities and the relevant stakeholders on the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and the Gender Plan of Action here in Geneva. Listening to perspectives and analysis on roles of indigenous people and local communities in this important cause, and the expectations of how the new program of work on Article 8J and other provisions of the Convention support the realization of the framework's goals and targets. The message is very clear: building bridges between cultures and knowledge systems, as well as recognizing, valuing, and supporting the collective and local action of indigenous peoples and local communities would be critical steps forward. Standing here before you, I'm reminded of the long road we have walked and together since the first meeting of the working group on AJ and related preventions occurred in Seville, Spain in 2000. Today, I'm honored in this regard. I would like to share with you some good examples in China. China has actively established a system of protected nature areas with national parks as the main component, nature reserves as a foundation, and various nature parks as a supplement. It attaches great importance to the value of protected area and size for the protection of rare and endangered species. Numerous biocultural protected area founded on traditional culture and under community administration contribute prospectively to the preservation on both ecological and cultural diversity. Yunnan province, this side of the part one of COP15 has been actively supporting the prevention of biodiversity and biodiversity-related traditional knowledge by initiating many pilot projects for the protection of sacred natural sites in communities. By its own methods, despite current best efforts, biodiversity continues its rapid decline, and in an alarming rate, we continue to lose forests, wetlands, and other ecosystems, particularly across the globe. At the same time, the IP-based global assessment revealed that nature is generally declining less rapidly in indigenous people land than in other land. Distinguished delegates, in these transformative times, indigenous people and the local communities, biological and cultural diversity can and should make a virtual and major contribution to overcome the crisis. In short, the work being carried out here this week offers an opportunity for parties to listen to the words indigenous people and the local communities to take a lead in the implementation of international commitments contained in the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Let's be guided by our long-term vision of living in harmony with nature by 2050. As we consider the agenda item before us, I encourage us to recognize the vast common ground on which we can work and build on in building a new proposed program of work for Article AJ and other preventions, as well as institutional arrangements that can effectively support the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. I am convinced that recognizing, valuing, and supporting the collective and the local actions of indigenous peoples and the local communities will be central to our success in reaching our 2050 vision. This working group is a preeminent body of the Convention to building bridges between cultures and knowledge system for our journey to be living in harmony with nature. So my final message to you is be inspired by the framework to be ambitious, inclusive, and optimistic. Let us seize on the opportunities of this 12th meeting of the working group to highlight the centrality of the collective and the local actions of indigenous people and the local communities in supporting the implementation of this framework. Distinguished colleagues, you have a rich agenda before you. We will start with the following items. Item 3, in-depth dialogue, the role of languages in the intergenerational transmission of traditional knowledge in innovations and practice. Then we move on to address item 4 on the progress in the implementation of the priority, and item 6 on the proposed new program of work and the institutional arrangement. After joint considerations of item 6 and 4, item 5 on the knowledge management component of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework will be introduced. This will be followed by the consideration of item 7 on the joint program of work on the links between biological and cultural diversity, and finally by item 8 on the recommendations of the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. Esteemed colleagues, as we work together over the coming days, let us do so with a spirit of teamwork. I wish us fruitful deliberations, and I look forward to working with all of you to ensure the success of this meeting. With this, I declare the 12th meeting of the ad hoc open-ended intersessional working group on Article 8J and related provisions officially open. I now invite the Acting Executive Secretary of the Secretariat of the Convention, Mr. David Cooper, to address the meeting. You have the floor, Dr. Cooper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Mr. Kenneth Deere, representatives of parties and of the world's indigenous peoples and local communities, distinguished delegates. I extend a warm welcome to you to Geneva as we gather here from all corners of the world. I'd like to extend my sincere gratitude to Kenneth Deere of the Mohawk Nation, the Ganawaki, for his traditional blessing for our work. As well, I would like to thank you, Mr. Chair, and the Chinese Presidency and all Bureau members for your continued leadership and guidance, and also our colleagues among the indigenous peoples and local communities for their cooperation in preparing for this meeting as well. I'd also like to thank our host, Switzerland, for facilitating our presence here and for welcoming us here. I'd also like to thank the many donors who have made these meetings possible by supporting the participation of delegates from developing countries and countries with economies in transition, including Australia, Austria, Belgium, Canada, Finland, Germany, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, New Zealand, Sweden, Switzerland, the Republic of Korea, Japan, and the United Kingdom. Distinguished delegates, this working group has served us as a forum for a rich cultural exchange for more than 20 years. Its achievements have been very significant. I will not list them all here. Suffice to say that this working group has raised the profile of indigenous peoples and of local communities as essential partners in our work, especially as on-the-ground partners in implementation. We've reached a pivotal moment, not just in the life of this working group, but in the relationship between the Convention and indigenous peoples, as well as local communities. The interrelated crises of climate change, biodiversity loss, and the degradation of lands and waters are threatening the health of the planet and undermining the health of people. Relying on nature for their everyday needs, indigenous peoples and local communities are among the most directly affected by these crises. But they are also at the forefront of defending the environment and protecting Mother Earth. The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework is a key milestone, as it clearly acknowledges the important roles and contributions of Indigenous peoples and local communities as custodians of biodiversity and as partners in its conservation, restoration, and sustainable use. The framework also recognizes and considers diverse values, systems, and concepts, including those that recognize the rights of nature and the rights of Mother Earth. Recognizing the human right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is crucial to the framework, underscoring that biodiversity is essential for supporting life on Earth. The implementation of the framework must ensure that the rights of Indigenous peoples and of local communities are respected. Building on its substantial achievements over 2 decades, this meeting will consider both the new programme of work for Article 8J and other provisions of the Convention, as well as new institutional arrangements to facilitate the inclusive implementation of the framework towards our vision of living in harmony with nature. And it's poignant to recall that the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples continue to safeguard lands and waters that remain significantly less degraded than much of the rest of the world. These territories are the last refuge of a considerable portion of our planet's remaining biodiversity, as well as cultural and linguistic diversity. The intimate, interwoven relationship between these communities and nature reminds us of our shared responsibility towards biodiversity, towards nature and each other. Distinguished colleagues, the task before us is of paramount importance if we are to implement the ambitious objectives outlined in the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. As countries update their national biodiversity strategies and action plans and align national targets with the framework, let us remember that there are no better partners than Indigenous peoples and local communities. They hold considerable traditional knowledge as well as contemporary experience relevant to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. Although this working group has effectively contributed to raising the profile of Indigenous peoples and local communities and the value of their traditional knowledge in our work, I'm convinced that we can collectively do more to tap into the power of traditional knowledge and local action to reach our goals. This is a new opportunity, and we must seize this moment to do so. I hope you may keep this in mind in your deliberations this week. I trust that the work before you will be a catalyst for unity, transcending the polarization that has enveloped so much of our world. Let us build consensus and pave a way forward. I'm pleased to report that Indigenous peoples and local communities, women and youth, working with parties, have already started work. An international dialogue held just prior to this meeting has allowed them to prepare their thoughts and to start an informal dialogue with parties and other partners on some of the topics that will be addressed under the various agenda items this week. Let us be ambitious. We have a very good basis for our work, and I would like to thank the members of the ad hoc technical expert group for preparing the draft programme of work, as well as all those that have contributed through their comments to this process. I'd also like to thank Brazil for hosting the ad hoc technical expert group and for arranging a visit to the Indigenous communities. I trust that we can find consensus, and I hope the working group can send a clean recommendation on the proposed new programme of work to COP16. This would send a very positive and strong signal and be a catalyst for our ongoing efforts to align all of the programmes of work with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework to support its implementation. We have an exciting agenda ahead of us, and I extend my best wishes to all of you for a successful week ahead. Thank you very much.
I thank you, Mr. David Cooper, for your opening remarks. I would like to reiterate my thanks to you for the outstanding work that you and your team did in supporting us throughout a complicated negotiation process towards the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And of course, for all the hard work done in relation to preparing for this meeting. Distinguished representatives, we will now move to item 2, organizational matters. Before we start our work, I would like to invite the Secretariat to give us some information on the use of the microphones and on accessing documents from the website and other logistic information. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you wish to speak, please press the mic button only once. Once the mic light will turn green and we will be notified of your request. Please know that pressing the button twice will cancel the request to speak. The chair will invite you to speak when it is your turn, and the technicians will turn on your microphone and your light will become red. Please start speaking. Please remove your earphone and keep them away from the microphones to avoid feedback. Please speak close to the microphone, slowly and clearly in dictation speed so that interpreters can provide a clear translation. This is important as it will allow all delegates to fully understand your intervention. Some delegates from IGO, Indigenous People and Local Communities, and NGOs who request the floor may be identified only by a number and not the organization name. When you are given the floor, please identify your organization before commencing your intervention. Delegates are requested to upload their statements, their written statements, using the online application on the meeting page. In case of any difficulty in using the online system, delegate may send the statement by email to statement@cbd.int. It greatly facilitates the work of the interpreters if you upload your statements prior to delivery. However, your statement will only be posted on the website after your delivery. In any case, statements must be submitted within 1 hour after the close of the session in which the agenda item was considered. In your submission, please make sure to include the name of your country and organization and the agenda item on the first page of the document that is uploaded. Uploading instructions were included in your Priority Pass mail, along with your dedicated link, which leads you directly to the upload page. Please note that the venue hours of operation are from 7 in the morning until midnight. For that, we request that all delegates leave the premises by midnight and that the building be empty. Finally, catering services within the venue will be operational from 9:30 until 8:30. In an effort to reduce paper consumption during official CBD meeting, the Secretariat is no longer printing hard copies of in-session document for distribution. Participants are strongly encouraged to use electronic versions of the document available for download on the website. We would like also to draw your attention to the mobile application CBD Events app, which was developed for the UN Biodiversity Conference in 2018. The CBD Events app is free of charge for both Android and iPhone and can be downloaded from the CBD website at www.cbd.int/CBD-events. Thank you in advance for your commitment and support to reducing paper consumption at the CBD meetings. In addition, in order to further reduce consumption during the meetings, we would request participants to keep their name badge, lane words at the end of this meeting and to bring them for future CBD meetings so they can be reused. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Secretary. Distinguished delegate, I now invite you to item 2 of our agenda, entitled Organizational Matters. Starting with sub-item 2.1.1, invite delegates to consider the election of officials. In accordance with Rule 26.5 of the Rules of Procedure, the Bureau of the Conference of the Parties shall serve as the Bureau for its meeting. Therefore, in accordance with Rule 21, the Bureau agreed to designate Ms. Sihosana to act as a reporter of the meeting. Can I take it as this generally acceptable? I see no objection. It is so decided. I congratulate Mr. Sihosana for her designation as a reporter, and I invite her to take her seat on the podium. In addition, in keeping with the well-established and unique practice of this working group, the Bureau would like to propose the designation of 7 representatives of indigenous peoples and local communities as friends of the Bureau. You may recall that the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, UNPFII, and the Expert Mechanism on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples recognize 7 indigenous social cultural regions. The 7 representatives will be invited to attend the meetings of the Bureau and to act as co-chairs of possible contact groups. One of the friends of the Bureau would also act as co-chair of the working group. This approach ensures the fullest participation of representatives of indigenous peoples and local communities in this meeting, and the working group has always benefited from this established practice. Therefore, I propose that the representatives of indigenous people and the local communities be invited to designate 7 friends of Bureau, one of whom should be designated as co-chair for our meeting, as well as co-chairs for any contact groups or other arrangement as needed. I understand that following their consultations, the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity, IIFB, has nominated the following representatives as friends of the Bureau. Ms. Lucy Molenke from the African region, Ms. June Rubis from the Asian region, Ms. Yolanda Tarian from Central and South America and the Caribbean region, Ms. Paulina Subieva from Central and East Europe, the Russian Federation, Central Asia and Transcaucasia region, Ms. Rucheli Duriver from the North American region, Ms. Teresa Christine Grant from the Pacific region. Regarding the Arctic region, unfortunately, we received the notice that the representative from the Arctic region would not be able to attend this meeting, and as a result, the Indigenous Caucus was not able to nominate any representative from this region. The Indigenous co-chair identified is Ms. June Rubis. Can I take this as the nominated representatives are acceptable to the working group? I see no objection. It is so decided. This completes our decision on agenda item 2.1. I congratulate the 7 friends of the Bureau and look forward to working with them to ensure the success of this meeting. I would like to invite the Indigenous co-chair, Ms. June Rubis, to join me on the podium. I now invite Ms. Rubis to make a few brief remarks. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I want to begin by expressing my sincere appreciation for the trust that you have placed in me. It is an honor for me to have been nominated as co-chair, and I thank the Indigenous Caucus and promise to serve to the best of my ability to advance our shared interests and trust. One of the distinctive and enriching aspects of the meetings of the Working Group on Article 8J and related provisions lies in the diverse range of practices that have been put in place to ensure the full and effective participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities in our Working Group meetings. These practices are the embodiment of inclusivity, reinforcing the fundamental principle that the voices of those who live in harmony with nature are not only recognized, but heard. We have identified the challenges that lie before us, and we have convened with a shared purpose, the pursuit of transformative solutions. Through open dialogue, collaborative efforts, and the exchange of knowledge and experiences, we can navigate the intricacies and address the issues that profoundly impact Indigenous peoples and local communities. Mr. Chairman, I am committed to assisting you in this important endeavor. With shared determination, I am confident that our collective efforts will yield meaningful and positive outcomes for all. Once again, thank you for entrusting me with this role.
Thank you. I look forward to working together to guide the work of this group. I now invite you to turn to document the CBD-WG8j-12/1 REV/1, the provincial agenda. The proposed agenda is based on the mandate of the working group set out in Decision 15/10. It has been approved by the Bureau. I now submit the provincial agenda for your adoption. I see no objection. The provincial agenda is therefore adopted as the agenda for this meeting. During this morning, all sessions will be held in plenary. Each item will be introduced by the Secretariat. The working group will move to statements, focuses on the draft conclusions and the recommendations on these items immediately after the introduction of each item by the Secretariat. Priority will be given to regional statement. During yesterday's COP Bureau meeting, a proposal was put forward to allow representatives of indigenous people and the local communities the opportunity to address the working group before parties as first speakers. When the floor is open to consider the different agenda items before us, this means that when we open an agenda item for consideration, the floor will be given to indigenous peoples and the local communities, followed by parties and then other major groups. Regarding the organization of work, the Executive Secretary, in consultation with the Bureau, proposed the allocation of tasks for the meeting is described in Annex 1 of the annotated agenda contained in document WG8j-12/1/ADD.1 with two small exceptions. First, given the time constraint, I would suggest that we go straight to work on agenda item 3 this morning. For this afternoon, it is proposed that the plenary will then take up both item 4 and 6 concurrently. Item 4 is a progress report, where item 6 relates to the development of the new program of work and institutional arrangement. Item 4 on progress report, document CBD-WG8j-12/3 does not contain any recommendation, and its contents will be updated and submitted to SBI 4 for its consideration. Under item 5 on knowledge management, the working group is invited to focus its consideration on aspects related to traditional knowledge. Therefore, a peer review of the document is established after working group session. The peer review will provide additional opportunities for parties and observers to provide views and comments on the document. Hence, there is no need to have extensive discussion on this. It is my intention this morning to move the agenda item 3 on the in-depth dialogue, and in the afternoon session to have a first reading of item 4 and 6, followed by item 5, time permitting. This will put us in a good position timing-wise to address items 7 and 8 tomorrow morning and leave morning afternoon clear for a contact group should this be needed. I now submit the proposed organization of work for your adoption with this modification. So, DPC, you have the floor. Democratic Republic of Congo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, pour la parole accordée. Et merci pour ces dispositions clarifiées que vous venez de nous donner en ce qui concerne l'organisation des travaux. Les règles et procédures soutiennent que les partis devraient prendre parole, n'est-ce pas, avant les peuples autochtones et communautés locales et tout autre observateur. En particulier, la règle 7 demande que s'il y a des modifications proposées en ce qui concerne les observateurs, 3/4 des membres présents à la réunion devraient donc donner leur aval pour ce type de changement et de modifications. Nous voudrions donc proposer que vous puissiez vérifier si, avant d'accepter ces modifications, les 3/4 des membres ici présents sont d'accord avec ces propositions, des dispositions que vous avez proposées pour que les peuples autochtones prennent la parole avant les partis. Merci.
Merci beaucoup for your intervention. Yeah. So with this, we had a bureau meeting yesterday. Some bureau members raised these changes, and we agreed during the bureau member there will be a regional consultation. If there is no objection until midnight of last night, regard there is no objection. We want to practice for this time, but we don't have received any objections from any reason, and all agreed by the Bureau only for this meeting. But if you want to continue your objection, we can consider. So the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, pour la parole. Je voudrais juste ici dire que il s'agit ici, comme vous l'avez dit, et qu'il n'y a pas eu d'objection. Je voudrais que cela soit mentionné dans le rapport de cette réunion qu'il s'agit ici d'une mesure exceptionnelle et qui ne pourra pas constituer une sorte de précédent juridique ou alors de jurisprudence lors des prochaines réunions. Merci.
Merci beaucoup for your cooperation. So I think your request is quite in line with the rule of procedure of the convention. It is well noted, and also it's also agreed by the Bureau that it will be just for this meeting. It will be not a practice for the later meeting to change the convention. So thanks for your flexibility and understanding, and also your defend the rule of the procedure. So if you agree, I would like to understand there is no objection for this meeting. So the organization of the work is approved. Now I propose to take our work with agenda item 3, which is the in-depth dialogue on the role of language in the intergenerational transmission of traditional knowledge, innovations, and practice. For this agenda item, I would like to invite my Indigenous co-chair, Ms. Rubis, to take the lead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates, in recent years, a consistent feature of our working group has been the in-depth dialogue. The topic for this session is the role of languages in the intergenerational transmission of traditional knowledge, innovations, and practices. I extend a warm welcome to our esteemed speakers and invite them to take the podium. I hand now to the Secretariat to introduce and facilitate the in-depth dialogue.
Thank you, Co-Chair. In its decision 1043, the Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity decided to include a new agenda item for future meetings of the ad hoc, open-ended Intersessional Working Group on Article 8J and related provisions of the Convention, entitled In-Depth Dialogue on Thematic Areas and Other Cross-Cutting Issues. In its decision 1520, the Conference of the Parties decided that the topic for the in-depth dialogue to be held at the 12th meeting of the Working Group would be the role of languages in the intergenerational transmission of traditional knowledge, innovations, and practices. The in-depth dialogue will involve presentations by a panel of experts. I will invite these experts to come to the stage. Mr. Mejia Montalvo, Dr. Yolanda Terán, and Dr. Mohamed Handaine. And I will introduce them more extensively when they have arrived. On the basis of past practice, the outcomes of the in-depth dialogue will be annexed to the report of the meeting. So you, the participants in the dialogue, may wish to consider the following questions. First of all, what roles do Indigenous languages play in the transmission of traditional knowledge for biocultural conservation? Second, what would be the significance of incorporating the revitalization of Indigenous languages into the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework? 3, how can the framework best contribute to supporting the revitalization of Indigenous languages and the intergenerational transmission of traditional knowledge? And 4th, what are the strategies to ensure the prioritization and protection of the intergenerational transmission of traditional knowledge, including spiritual connections to the land, while respecting the rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities within the context of the framework? It's my pleasure now to introduce our speakers who have taken the stage. Each of the presenters will present for up to 7 minutes each, followed by questions from you, the participants, and then further reflections from the speakers. So starting from the far side, we have Mr. Mohamed Handaine, who is the president of the Indigenous Peoples of Africa's Coordinating Committee. He's a member of the Steering Committee of the International Decade of Indigenous Languages, 2022 to 2032 of UNESCO. He's the director of the Center for Historical and Environmental Amazigh Studies and president of the Confederation of Amazigh Associations of Southern Morocco. Thank you, Doctor. Beside him, we have Dr. Yolanda Terán. Dr. Yolanda Terán has been actively engaged in a variety of projects and departments at the University of New Mexico, including the Native American Studies Department. Currently, she serves as part-time faculty at the Native American Studies at Chicano-Chicana Studies. Her research endeavors have covered a wide array of topics, ranging from Indigenous education and languages to Indigenous research in Latin America. Welcome, Doctor. And beside me is Mr. Dario Mejia Montalvo, who belongs to the Indigenous Zenu people of San Andrés Sotavento. He serves as the chair of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. The Forum, as you know, has actively advocated for the adoption of the International Decade of Indigenous Languages, 2022-2032, and the basic rights of Indigenous peoples. Mr. Mejia Montalvo is a trained political scientist, holding a degree from the National University of Colombia, and he also holds a master's degree in development management from the University of the Autonomous Regions of the Nicaraguan Caribbean Coast. So each of the speakers will have up to 7 minutes for remarks, and we will follow that with questions from the floor. When we take the questions from the floor, I'll ask everyone to be very brief so we can have the maximum participation possible. So, Mr. Mejia Montalvo, I'll give you the floor first.
Señor Presidente, señora copresidenta, primero permítanme felicitarles por su designación y augurarle muchos éxitos en estas deliberaciones y jornadas. Distinguido doctor Kenneth Dier, muchas gracias por sus palabras de armonización en esta mañana. señor secretario y todo su equipo de trabajo, distinguidas delegaciones de los estados, partes, distinguidas delegaciones de los pueblos indígenas, distinguidas delegaciones de las comunidades locales, entidades de la ONU, delegados, delegaciones de las ONGs, la academia y otros sectores, miembros del Foro Permanente que están presentes. Gracias a los cooperantes, al gobierno suizo por acogernos en esta sesión de trabajo. Excelencias todos, muy amables. Como ya lo hemos dicho en la sesión inaugural del Foro Permanente de este año, para la mayoría de los pueblos indígenas, el clima es el lenguaje mediante el cual la Madre Tierra nos enseña la manera como cuidar la vida sobre este planeta. Nos enseña, por ejemplo, cuándo sembrar, cuándo recolectar, cuándo abrigarse, cuándo no hacerlo, cuáles plantas son útiles para atender algunas enfermedades o cuál es el tiempo apropiado para hacer las ceremonias de ofrenda a la naturaleza. Todas estas son las enseñanzas de la Madre Tierra a través del clima. El clima, en conclusión, es el lenguaje de la vida en el planeta. El cambio acelerado en los ciclos del clima y la pérdida de la diversidad es un reflejo de la pérdida del principal idioma que tenemos en común la humanidad y todos los demás seres que vivimos este planeta. Desde la creación del Foro Permanente de las Naciones Unidas para las Cuestiones Indígenas, se han hecho recomendaciones importantes para que los pueblos indígenas puedan superar las condiciones de riesgo de sus idiomas. Debo reconocer que ha habido algunas respuestas. Por ejemplo, el Departamento de Asuntos Económicos y Sociales de las Naciones Unidas organizó 2 reuniones del grupo de expertos sobre lenguas indígenas, uno en 2008 y otro en 2016, y la Asamblea General proclamó el año 2019 como el Año Internacional de las Lenguas Indígenas, y a continuación se proclamó el Decenio Internacional de las Lenguas Indígenas 2022-2032, en el cual nos encontramos actualmente. Aunque a nivel internacional las herramientas para la protección y revitalización de las lenguas indígenas se ha ido desarrollando de manera paulatina, aún tenemos enormes retos a nivel nacional. Existe una creciente demanda por parte de los pueblos indígenas para que los Estados miembros aborden de mejor manera el alto riesgo de la pérdida de las lenguas indígenas, lo que incluye garantizar programas de educación intercultural, bilingüe o multilingüe según sea el contexto, la financiación adecuada para iniciativas de revitalización y protección, programas de cooperación transfronteriza entre lenguas indígenas y el uso de la tecnología de la información y comunicaciones para promover las lenguas y facilitar los esfuerzos de revitalización lingüística en todo el mundo. El marco global de biodiversidad de Kunming-Montreal reconoce el importante papel y las contribuciones de los pueblos indígenas como custodios de la diversidad. Sus derechos, conocimientos, incluidos los conocimientos propios asociados a la biodiversidad, innovaciones, cosmovisiones, valores y prácticas, sin duda los idiomas propios contienen los códigos originales de dichos sistemas de conocimientos. Queridos amigas y amigos, la diversidad lingüística no es un asunto solo de los pueblos indígenas. Las palabras son espíritus. Sus diversas y sus formas de riqueza son de toda la humanidad. Cada palabra que se pierda en cada idioma es una pérdida para toda la humanidad. La preservación y revitalización de las lenguas indígenas permiten la representación de diversas visiones del mundo, sistemas de valores y de experiencias del cuidado de la vida. Estas lenguas son componentes esenciales del patrimonio vivo de la humanidad y de la transferencia de dichos conocimientos de generación en generación. Enfrentamos retos enormes. Con preocupación hemos visto que en distintas regiones del mundo se han incrementado los discursos de odio en contra de los pueblos indígenas, generalmente utilizando canales de medios corporativos de comunicación que utilizan el argumento de la libertad de prensa o de expresión para mantener esta matriz de comunicación. Por lo tanto, es urgente que se generen campañas y escenarios de diálogo para revertir sus impactos negativos en las distintas regiones. Para finalizar, como lo hemos visto en la ceremonia de la mañana de hoy, de apertura del Dr. Kenneth, cada idioma contiene los códigos para relacionarse con los territorios, de tal forma que la división entre la vida de los seres humanos y la de los demás seres de la naturaleza está contenida en dichos idiomas. Así que esta perspectiva integral de la vida y su equilibrio necesita ser incorporada en los sistemas de producción de conocimiento, de los planes de trabajo y los retos que enfrenta el Convenio de la Diversidad Biológica. Desde esta perspectiva, el Foro Permanente ha insistido con recomendaciones que tienen el propósito de contribuir con el trabajo que los estados y las entidades de las Naciones Unidas desarrollan en la actualidad y que tienen relación con los pueblos indígenas de forma específica. La década de las lenguas indígenas en la cual nos encontramos no se trata solo de asegurar que los idiomas de los pueblos indígenas se mantengan o se recuperen, sino que además es una oportunidad para fortalecer el uso del lenguaje de los derechos de los pueblos indígenas de manera apropiada en todas las entidades de la ONU. Les pido que con este espíritu cooperativo, constructivo y orientador reciban todas las recomendaciones que el Foro Permanente ha realizado y seguirá promoviendo en relación con este tan importante proceso que resulta vital para todas y todos en todos los lugares del mundo. Muchas gracias, muy amables, por haberme escuchado.
Thank you very, very much for your remarks. Words themselves are spirits and are part of the heritage of humanity. That's a very interesting phrase, a very good phrase to hear. I now invite Dr. Yolanda Terran to deliver remarks to the group. Yolanda.
Alipunja, Machicuna, Ñuca, Yolanda Terán, Mecani, Ecuador, Mamayactamanta. Agradezco por la invitación a participar en el diálogo a fondo sobre el papel de las lenguas indígenas en la transmisión intergeneracional de conocimientos tradicionales, innovaciones y prácticas. Para los pueblos indígenas, las lenguas indígenas son parte de nuestra cultura, de nuestra identidad y de nuestra vida. A través de nuestras lenguas podemos expresar quiénes somos, nuestro pensar, nuestro sentir y nuestro ser. Las lenguas indígenas se transmiten oralmente de generación en generación. Son un medio de comunicación y repositorios de tradiciones, conocimientos tradicionales y de las conexiones con la Madre Tierra, con las historias de vida que en muchos casos solamente quedan registradas en la memoria de nuestros ancianos. Las utilizamos para rezar, para cantar, para danzar, para contar nuestras historias y para expresar los valores de los hombres y mujeres y sus distintos roles en sus actividades cotidianas. Las lenguas indígenas se refieren a lugares sagrados, a códigos, eventos, propiedades y relaciones. Expresan conocimientos, creencias, actitudes, ciencias, tecnologías y las cosmovisiones ancestrales forjadas durante cientos de años. Nuestras lenguas son fundamentales para comprender valores, ideologías y otros aspectos intangibles de la cultura. Están asociadas a los saludos, a las leyes, a la literatura, proverbios, sueños, bromas, sabiduría, símbolos, metáforas y diferentes parentescos. Entre los pueblos indígenas Una canción, un cuento o un conocimiento medicinal tiene relación intrínseca con los seres humanos, con animales, con las plantas y lugares particulares. Nuestras lenguas indígenas están vinculadas a la tenencia de la tierra y a un medio ambiente seguro y saludable. Si en un entorno no es seguro, el número de hablantes va a disminuir y, en consecuencia, el uso de las lenguas también disminuirá, poniendo en peligro esa lengua y la cultura. Nuestras lenguas están ligadas también a los sistemas alimentarios, a las tierras, a los territorios y a las aguas, y a los conocimientos tradicionales, a los ecosistemas, a los procesos ecológicos y a los ecosistemas vulnerables. Nuestras lenguas son únicas porque representan un microcosmos completo con su propia lingüística, su propia cosmovisión, espiritualidad, ética y comunidad de los hablantes. Son vulnerables porque existen en el macrocosmos de las lenguas dominantes. En nuestras lenguas indígenas están inmersos varios conocimientos, varias ideas, varios conceptos. Siempre decimos que todo está interrelacionado, interligado. Por eso, por ejemplo, dentro de mi cultura, cuando mencionamos la palabra chakra, no es solamente la palabra cementera. Estoy hablando de los ciclos de la luna, del sol, de la preparación de la tierra, de las ceremonias. Estoy hablando de las relaciones de solidaridad, de la redistribución de productos. En fin, estoy hablando de las relaciones de los hombres y de los hombres con la madre tierra. Hablamos mucho de las semillas nativas, de nuestras ceremonias para nuestras semillas, de los roles que tienen los hombres y las mujeres indígenas cuando hablamos del ciclo agrícola. En el marco del diseño de las lenguas indígenas, del programa conjunto de trabajo, de las consideraciones de la UNESCO, de los derechos humanos de los pueblos indígenas, por ejemplo, el artículo 3, el artículo 31 de la Declaración de los Derechos Humanos de los Pueblos Indígenas, del nuevo marco global de biodiversidad Kunming-Montreal, es imperativo trabajar de manera conjunta en el reconocimiento de nuestros derechos humanos, en la tenencia segura de la tierra, territorios y aguas, en el reconocimiento del rol de las mujeres indígenas en la enseñanza y en la transmisión de las lenguas indígenas, en la elaboración y aplicación efectiva de políticas lingüísticas interculturales, en la asignación de recursos financieros y la elaboración de programas y actividades culturalmente apropiadas y diseñadas por los mismos pueblos indígenas. También es importante considerar la recuperación, la revalorización, uso y mantenimiento de las lenguas indígenas y los diferentes dialectos culturales mediante el registro de las lenguas indígenas, la creación de nidos de lengua, la realización de diagnósticos sobre la situación real de las lenguas indígenas, la recuperación de los dominios culturales de las lenguas en todas las actividades diarias a través del consentimiento libre, previo, informado y la participación plena y efectiva de los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales, mujeres y jóvenes. Es importante tomar en cuenta que la recuperación de las lenguas indígenas tiene también que ver con el perdón y la reconciliación con la madre tierra, con la restauración de los ecosistemas terrestres y fluviales desde las culturas indígenas. Recordar que tenemos mucho que sanar, la práctica verdadera de nuestras lenguas y culturas y la aplicación del nuevo marco global de biodiversidad tendrá que realizarse dentro del círculo sagrado y en un marco de respeto, aceptación, inclusión, confianza, colaboración y justicia social y ambiental. Muchas gracias por la palabra.
Thank you, Dr. Teran. Languages are related to places, and recovery of language also has to do with forgiveness and reconciliation with Mother Earth and restoration. That's a point that really struck with me. It's very my pleasure now to invite Dr. Handaine to speak to the floor. Doctor, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Aïtmed Isma Azul Fillaou. Je suis Mohamed Hendain du Maroc. Je voudrais d'abord remercier la CBD de m'avoir invité à participer à cette réunion de grande importance. C'est un grand plaisir pour moi de partager avec vous mon expérience de plus de 30 années du travail dans le domaine des langues autochtones. Mesdames et messieurs, le résultat qui figure dans la section C du cadre mondial et ce point qu'on discute aujourd'hui constitue le fruit du processus d'un combat et lutte pacifique de 100 ans, jour par jour. En 1923, le chef de la Ligue des Iroquois, Daihaske, qui représente la Confédération des 6 nations des Iroquois, quitte le Canada pour une mission ici à Genève. Le chef a déclenché un travail acharné qui n'a jamais été arrêté jusqu'à présent. Les peuples autochtones du monde ont pu convaincre la communauté internationale de l'importance de la première mémoire de l'humanité, le savoir traditionnel. Le monde s'est rendu compte qu'il a besoin, plus que jamais, de la sagesse autochtone, la vision autochtone du monde pour freiner le processus de l'autodestruction de l'homme et de sa civilisation. Cette sagesse autochtone se compose des cultures, des langues, de la philosophie basée sur le respect de la nature. Mesdames et messieurs, les peuples autochtones ont aujourd'hui une feuille de route qui se compose de la Convention 169, de l'accord de Paris et du cadre mondial de la biodiversité. Derrière tous ces accords, il y a un travail gigantesque des partis et des peuples autochtones. Cependant, si tout ce travail minutieux ne trouve pas un écho de l'application au niveau national, cela restera des efforts regrettables. La majorité de ces accords et conventions insistent sur l'importance des savoirs traditionnels dans la préservation de la biodiversité, mais on ne trouve pas cette focalisation sur les langues autochtones, comme si on parle de l'eau, de la rivière, sans parler de la source. Si la langue est disparue, les savoirs traditionnels disparaissent automatiquement. Les langues autochtones et les savoirs traditionnels sont indissociables. La section C du cadre mondial et la cible 21 constituent pour nous une base de travail de l'application du rôle des langues autochtones dans la transmission des connaissances traditionnelles pour préserver la biodiversité. C'est à travers la langue que la femme autochtone transmet à ses enfants les valeurs et le respect de la nature, l'éducation par la pratique. Elle enseigne à leurs enfants la façon et les pratiques dont on traite les bétails, la végétation. Nous avons plusieurs exemples en Afrique. Les Mbororo du Tchad transmettent dans leur langue des guides de la transhumance avec une carte orale extraordinaire des corridors de passage en utilisant les étoiles et la direction des oiseaux et des reptiles. Chez la femme amazigh au Maroc, avec les savoirs traditionnels à travers la langue amazigh, elle a pu garder la forêt de l'arganier aujourd'hui le patrimoine universel. Mesdames et messieurs, les connaissances traditionnelles ne sont pas seulement des pratiques isolées, éparpillées, hasardeuses, mais c'est tout un système basé sur l'accumulation des expériences à travers l'histoire, génération et génération. Ce système extraordinaire doit être pris en considération dans sa globalité. Le cadre mondial sera une opportunité extraordinaire pour revitaliser ces langues autochtones dans sa mise en application. Et durant le processus de cette mise en considération, il y aura une relation dialectique entre la promotion des langues autochtones et l'application du cadre mondial. En guise de conclusion, quelle sera la stratégie permettant de donner la priorité à la transmission intergénérationnelle des connaissances traditionnelles? Quelle que soit la nature de la stratégie et son efficacité, s'il n'est pas en collaboration avec les peuples autochtones, les résultats ne seront pas satisfaisants. La décennie internationale des langues autochtones 2022-2032 constitue également une chance historique pour sauver et promouvoir ces langues autochtones. Il existe dans notre région des expériences exemplaires de la protection des langues autochtones à explorer et encourager. Il s'agit ici de l'officialisation de la langue amazigh au Maroc et en Algérie. Nous sommes devant un méga chantier de transformation au niveau national dans plusieurs domaines. En premier lieu, le domaine législatif pour adopter le cadre législatif national au cadre mondial de la biodiversité, notamment la reconnaissance des langues autochtones et sa promotion. Dans ce cadre de la mise en œuvre de ce cadre mondial et sa mise en application, il y a deux actions d'urgence. Au niveau national, répertorier les connaissances traditionnelles pour établir un répertoire national des connaissances traditionnelles. Établir une banque de données des connaissances traditionnelles avec des codifications des pays. Les connaissances traditionnelles répertoriées et codifiées pourront être partagées au niveau national. Au niveau international, Monsieur le Président, une base de données internationale des connaissances traditionnelles doit être installée auprès du secrétariat de la CBD, en connexion avec les bases de données des États parties. Une connexion permanente entre la base centrale internationale auprès de la CBD et les bases des données des États parties, cela permettra un échange extraordinaire des expériences des peuples autochtones à travers le monde, tout ça tout en garantissant les droits découlés de l'utilisation de ces connaissances traditionnelles aux peuples autochtones. Mesdames et messieurs, c'est avec cette bonne foi que les peuples autochtones et toutes les parties prenantes pourront contribuer à la mise en œuvre du cadre mondial de la biodiversité. C'est un challenge historique pour toute l'humanité. Merci pour votre attention.
Thank you very, very much, Doctor. Thank you for reminding us that 100 years ago here in Geneva, these issues were indeed advanced, which is very exciting to hear. Also, thank you for your question of the opportunities of the framework and the concrete examples of ways to move forward. We now open the floor to questions from the assembled delegates. Please make your request by pushing the buttons as instructed by my colleagues, and we'll give you the floor. I would ask that any comments or statements be brief, 2 minutes each if possible, maybe 3, so that we can have the maximum participation possible. So the floor is open. I see a request from IPLC 1. You should have the floor now, please.
I speak on behalf of the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. I'd like to start by congratulating June Rubis for her election as a co-chair of the working group 8J, and we are confident that she and the co-chair will make this meeting a success. Languages take a central role in the intergenerational transmission of traditional knowledge, innovation, and practices underpinning indigenous peoples and local communities' cultural values, identity, and governance systems for generations. The number of speakers of indigenous languages is an important indicator of ecosystem health. There is abundant evidence showing the direct relationship between cultural vitality and biological diversity. Indigenous languages also provide a window into the gendered aspects of human-nature interaction, offering diverse perspectives on biodiversity conservation and unique insights into stewardship and practices. The IIFB emphasizes the important role of women, particularly indigenous mothers and grandmothers, who welcome us to Mother Earth with the first words in our languages. The United Nations General Assembly has declared the International Decade of Indigenous Languages from 2022 to 2032 to draw attention to the critical status of many indigenous languages across the world and to encourage concrete action for the preservation, revitalization, and promotion of the intergenerational transmission of these languages. The IIFB recalls the decision 15/22 of the Conference of the Party on Nature and Culture, which adopted the elements and tasks related to the joint program of work on the links between biological and cultural diversity. The IIFB welcomes the draft recommendations with small changes. The IIFB suggests that in the preamble, the beginning paragraph could read, recognizing the International Decade of Indigenous Languages 2022 and 2033. In the third paragraph of the preamble, which noted Target 22, after the words "the Conference of Parties," the IIFB proposes to use the exact language from Target 21, so the text will read, further noting that in Target 21 of the framework, the Conference of the Parties called for the best available data, information, and knowledge are accessible to decision makers, practitioners, and the public to guide effective and equitable governance, integrated and participatory management of biodiversity, and to strengthen communication, awareness raising, education, monitoring, research, and knowledge management. And also in this context, traditional knowledge, innovations, practices, and technologies of indigenous peoples and local communities should only be accessed with free, prior, and informed consent. In the paragraph 4 of the preamble, at the end of the paragraph...
Distinguished delegate, the interpreters have asked that you speak a little more slowly. You have a very rich commentary that they want to capture. Thank you.
Thank you. In the paragraph 4 of the preamble, at the end of the paragraph after the words, living in harmony with nature, we propose adding, and emphasizing the need of making indigenous concepts, cosmovisions, and epistemologies more understandable for parties and all actors involved in the CBD process. In the 6th paragraph of the preamble, the IIFB recommends to end the sentence after the joint program of work on the links between biological and cultural diversity and delete the rest of the text and adopt the text in Target 21. And after that, we propose to add a new sentence that reads, parties should continue to implement the United Nations Resolution A/74/396 of International Decade of Indigenous Languages 2022 to 2032, when the decision and new program of work on Article 8J will be adopted by COP16. The IIFB also emphasizes the need for a more comprehensive indigenous action-led research on the links between languages, cultures, and biodiversity. The IIFB supports the theme of the text of the next in-depth dialogue with the strategies for mobilizing resources to ensure direct access to funding by indigenous peoples and local communities, to support the implementation of the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which could contribute to the implementation of Target 19. The IIFB suggests adequate financial mechanisms. We have submitted our recommendations in writing and request support for our recommendations from the parties. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Thank you, IIFB, for your remarks. And yes, noted that we have received these in writing. I now give the floor to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. DRC, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, pour la parole accordée. Et merci aussi aux représentants des peuples autochtones et des communautés locales pour leur déclaration. Et merci aussi aux experts du panel qui nous ont donné des éléments assez intéressants en ce qui concerne l'importance des langues dans la transmission des savoirs traditionnels et autochtones. Alors, il y a beaucoup de choses qui sont dites sur principalement le rôle et l'importance des langues dans la transmission des savoirs. Il y a des recommandations qui ont été données pour élaborer des répertoires nationaux des connaissances traditionnelles et des savoirs autochtones. Et il y a des recommandations notamment sur l'établissement des bases de données sur les connaissances traditionnelles et les peuples autochtones. Deux petites questions que je me pose. Premièrement, quelles sont les principales menaces auxquelles font face les connaissances traditionnelles et autochtones et leur langue? Parce qu'en connaissant les menaces, on peut être capable de bien résoudre le problème qui s'y pose. Deuxièmement, on a constaté que les peuples autochtones et les communautés locales, bien qu'ils participent énormément à la conservation de la biodiversité et à l'utilisation durable de leurs ressources, restent relégués au dernier plan en ce qui concerne l'accès au financement. Quels sont en fait les mécanismes qui vont permettre de promouvoir et de faciliter l'accès direct des peuples autochtones et des communautés locales au financement pour préserver leur langue, leur culture, leurs connaissances et leurs traditions, et quelles sont finalement les dispositions prises notamment par l'IPBES pour documenter les connaissances traditionnelles, les savoirs autochtones dans les différents rapports qui sont évalués, que ce soit sur le plan global, régional ou thématique. Et pour finir, donc, la République démocratique du Congo soutient la déclaration faite par les peuples autochtones et les communautés locales. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Democratic Republic of Congo. So I'll ask the panelists to note those questions, and when we come back to you, it'll be good to get replies from you. Thank you very, very much. I now recognize South Africa and give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. South Africa sees languages as a reflection of society. Languages also act as a repository of society's history
as vehicle of cultural transmission and as transmission of indigenous knowledge. Therefore, development of laws and policies to promote, protect, and preserve languages is essential. A recognition of languages should not only focus on spoken languages, but also unspoken ones, because recognition enhances provision of resources and capacity building. Documentation of languages is also key to making sure that languages are not lost. More and more languages are evolving, and that there is need to accommodate new languages. With regard to the recommendations to COP16, we are proposing an additional preambular paragraph, which will come after the first preambular, which reads, noting that through languages, indigenous peoples and local communities preserve their community's history, customs and traditions, memory, unique modes of thinking, meaning, and expression. And with regard to the proposed topic for the next in-depth dialogue, we propose the inclusion of women and youth in the topic in order to recognize their important role and contributions in supporting the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. So with our inclusion, the topic will now read, strategies for mobilizing resources to ensure direct access to funding by women, youth, and indigenous peoples and local communities to support the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. We'll submit our proposals in writing. Thank you.
Thank you, South Africa, and indeed we'll look forward to receiving those proposals from you in writing. I now give the floor to Guatemala. Guatemala, the mic is yours.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Les felicito por la ardua labor en el marco de las presentes negociaciones. La lengua materna es el principal vehículo de comunicación de las personas, a través de la cual expresan sus pensamientos, sentimientos y, en general, su forma de ver la vida o su cosmovisión. Por ello, debe ser utilizado en todos los ámbitos públicos y privados. De esa cuenta, Guatemala cuenta con una ley de idiomas nacionales que fomenta el reconocimiento, respeto, promoción, desarrollo y utilización de los idiomas de los pueblos mayas, garífunas y xinca. Si bien es cierto, como país aún afrontamos muchos retos y desafíos en su implementación, consideramos que al haber incluido la utilización de las lenguas indígenas dentro del marco mundial Kunming-Montreal y de incluirlo dentro del nuevo programa de trabajo del artículo 8J, refuerza nuestro compromiso como país para seguir catalizando los esfuerzos de los pueblos indígenas en la conservación y el uso sostenible de la diversidad biológica. En ese sentido, apoyamos la propuesta formulada por los pueblos indígenas. Gracias.
Thank you very, very much, Guatemala. I now recognize Brazil, and pardon me just a moment. I'm pleased to give the floor to the distinguished representative, the National Secretary of Indigenous, Environmental, and Territorial Management of the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples of Brazil. You have the floor.
Obrigada, senhor presidente. No Brasil, temos mais de 300 povos e mais de 200 línguas. Se consideramos que a língua é um dos traços principais que define a identidade e o traço cultural de um povo indígena, precisamos ter políticas públicas que garantam a manutenção deste traço cultural. Também temos outros povos que já tiveram seu direito à língua retirado pelo processo de colonização. À luz desses dois extremos, é uma política de Estado garantir o direito à cultura e à própria identidade. A língua preservada e cultuada também valoriza o conhecimento tradicional que o povo tem de seu território. Existem rituais, medicinas, tem festas, extrativismos, formas de se fazer o arado e de preservar a mata, formas de expressar o conhecimento da biodiversidade e do modo de se relacionar com elas, que são só expressas de maneira integrada a partir da cosmologia e da expressão linguística dos povos indígenas. Aqueles povos que não falam mais a língua tem que buscar ressignificar as coisas, como forma de preservar o conhecimento. Assim, entendemos que a preservação da língua é um elemento fundamental para o modo de vida indígena, que é o que melhor preserva a biodiversidade. Considerando que os povos indígenas passam o conhecimento tradicional por meio da cosmologia e linguagem indígena, esta convenção e outros acordos que visam a preservação da biodiversidade devem olhar para estes povos que preservam 80% da biodiversidade indígena e garantir que a cosmologia possa estar integrada na dinâmica da convenção. Assim, a primeira ação é garantir a atuação e presença de maneira diversificada com indígenas de todas as regiões, inclusive fortalecendo e ampliando a participação dos representantes dos povos indígenas nas delegações nacionais. O Brasil está dando seu exemplo com a criação do Ministério dos Povos Indígenas e garantindo a participação deste ministério nas mesas. Mas não basta só o Brasil, tem que ser um compromisso de toda a convenção. A segunda é a partir do financiamento a ações de preservações das línguas, uma parceria da Unesco com a Convenção sobre Diversidade Biológica no âmbito da Década Internacional das Línguas Indígenas, pode trazer diversas ações estruturantes e que fortaleçam a preservação das línguas, das cosmovisões dos territórios e da biodiversidade. Já existem ações concretas potencializadas pela década. Esta parceria pode permitir muito mais. Obrigada.
Thank you very, very much, Brazil. I give the floor now to the European Union.
Muchas gracias. Al ser la primera vez que tomo la palabra, permítame, en primer lugar, agradecer al Gobierno de Suiza y a la ciudad de Ginebra por hospedarnos estos días y hacer posible la celebración de esta importante reunión. Aprovecho también esta primera intervención para aclarar que durante esta reunión todas nuestras intervenciones, todas las que se hagan por parte de la delegación española, serán en nombre de la Unión Europea y sus 27 Estados miembros. Quisiera también, antes de nada, agradecer y felicitar a los tres ponentes por sus interesantísimas intervenciones y por compartir sus conocimientos y experiencias en diversos contextos regionales, en lo que respecta al rol y el potencial de las lenguas indígenas. Estimados copresidentes, estimados colegas, la Unión Europea y sus Estados miembros acogen con satisfacción este diálogo en profundidad como una oportunidad para compartir prácticas líderes sobre el fortalecimiento de la transmisión intergeneracional de conocimientos tradicionales y el importante papel de las lenguas indígenas para la gobernanza y gestión consuetudinaria sostenible de la biodiversidad. El tema del diálogo en profundidad es muy oportuno, teniendo en cuenta la década declarada de las lenguas indígenas, 2022-2032, y la importancia de apoyar el fomento y la revitalización de las lenguas indígenas para la implementación del Marco Global de Biodiversidad de Kunming-Montreal. El pueblo Sami son los pueblos indígenas de Sápmi. Sus territorios cruzan las fronteras entre Finlandia, Suecia, Noruega y Rusia. Hay varias lenguas Sami y el rico vocabulario de las lenguas Sami cuando se trata de describir paisajes, animales, naturaleza y condiciones climáticas ilustra la íntima conexión entre lengua, cultura y naturaleza. En el contexto Sami, el lenguaje es la condición más importante para expresar la responsabilidad de mantener el equilibrio ecológico en la naturaleza. Las lenguas Sami son un requisito previo y una herramienta necesaria para preservar el conocimiento tradicional sami y transmitirlo de una generación a otra. El idioma mantiene continuidad en tiempos de cambio cultural. La pérdida de uso de las lenguas indígenas y la pérdida de transmisión intergeneracional hace que sea más difícil, a veces imposible, transmitir conocimientos vitales sobre cómo conservar nuestro medio ambiente y vivir en armonía con la naturaleza. Por lo tanto, es fundamental apoyar el uso y la revitalización de las lenguas indígenas como parte y medio para la implementación del Marco Global de Biodiversidad de Kunming-Montreal. Por último, queremos apoyar las propuestas planteadas en la intervención del Foro Indígena Internacional para Biodiversidad, el FID. Muchas gracias, señores copresidentes.
Great, thank you very much, European Union. And your support for the intervention by the IFB is indeed noted. The floor is now to Mexico. Mexico, please.
Muy buenos días. Muchas gracias por la palabra. Primero que nada, quiero felicitar y agradecer por la organización de esta reunión al Buró y a los amigos del Buró que van a hacer. Les deseo que tengan un excelente trabajo en los siguientes días. También quiero agradecer a nuestra anfitrión suiza por hospedarnos con tanto agrado y hospitalidad. Quiero compartir con ustedes que en México recientemente se han editado los libros de texto gratuitos que se utilizan para la educación básica de nuestros niños en 64 de las 68 lenguas existentes en nuestro país. Esta es una acción justamente alineada y que va en el sentido de reconocer la importancia de la lengua materna como una manera de reconocer los conocimientos ancestrales de nuestras comunidades, de nuestros pueblos indígenas, que hoy más que nunca nos demuestran ante la crisis de biodiversidad, la crisis climática y de contaminación y de la desertificación y la falta de agua que enfrenta nuestro planeta, que reconocer estas lenguas es también un reconocimiento a los conocimientos y los saberes que existen en nuestros pueblos indígenas, pues nos permite acceder a nuevas formas o a unas formas que ya existían, pero que habíamos olvidado para resolver y enfrentar estos problemas que aquejan al planeta. En este sentido, es que, reitero, nuestro país está reconociendo, está dándole un nuevo valor, reinterpretando nuestra tradición de los pueblos indígenas y incorporarlo a la educación, al sistema educativo. Es una parte de ello, y no solamente con una visión de integrarlos al sistema educativo, sino de que sea parte de la generación de conocimiento y se incorpore a la generación de conocimiento por ahora en el nivel básico, pero seguramente en el futuro lo tendremos también en los demás niveles. Muchas gracias nuevamente.
Thank you very much, Mexico. I now give the floor to Argentina. Argentina, please.
Gracias, señor presidente. La Argentina agradece a la Secretaría la preparación del documento para el diálogo a fondo sobre el papel de las lenguas en la transmisión intergeneracional de conocimientos tradicionales, innovaciones y prácticas y guiará su intervención en base a las preguntas propuestas. La Argentina quisiera referirse, en primer lugar, a la importancia de las lenguas indígenas en la transmisión intergeneracional de los conocimientos tradicionales, las innovaciones y las prácticas. La transmisión intergeneracional y supervivencia de los conocimientos tradicionales, el uso de las plantas medicinales y sus connotaciones espirituales está íntimamente ligado a la cultura y las lenguas indígenas. Asimismo, la Argentina destaca el papel del bienestar de la generación transmisora y receptora en la transmisión de conocimientos tradicionales para la conservación biocultural. Al nombrar los pueblos indígenas en su propia lengua, todos los elementos del entorno y su propia existencia demuestran su profundo conocimiento y funcionamiento adquirido por la permanencia en el territorio. Las metas y los objetivos del Marco Mundial de Biodiversidad Kunming-Montreal están íntimamente ligados a la protección de los territorios indígenas. Garantizar su permanencia en los territorios con sus sistemas de conocimiento y comunicación íntegros resultará en un beneficio para la conservación de la biodiversidad. Las lenguas forman parte del pensamiento. El nombrar todos los componentes de la biodiversidad de los territorios de la manera en que lo conciben los pueblos indígenas tiene un valor relacionado con muchas generaciones experimentando y observando el territorio y sus componentes. En este sentido, revitalizar las lenguas resulta importante para valorar y respetar dicho conocimiento acumulado. Argentina considera que el marco mundial puede contribuir a apoyar la revitalización de las lenguas indígenas y la transmisión intergeneracional de los conocimientos tradicionales a partir de la promoción y articulación de la participación de los pueblos indígenas en las discusiones de las estrategias nacionales de biodiversidad, abordando los objetivos y metas del marco mundial en su propia lengua. El diálogo a fondo constituye una instancia sustantiva para incorporar el artículo 8J y disposiciones conexas en toda la labor realizada en el marco del convenio. A partir de la histórica adopción del Marco Mundial de Biodiversidad Kunming-Montreal, resulta menester abordar la temática como uno de los desafíos de su implementación. En este sentido, Argentina sugiere para el próximo diálogo el tema Estrategias para la participación de pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales en la implementación del Marco Mundial de Biodiversidad Kunming-Montreal, en línea con las estrategias y planes de acción nacionales en materia de diversidad biológica. Por último, Argentina tiene algunas breves sugerencias sobre el texto de recomendación que remitirá por escrito. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Argentina, and looking forward to receiving those comments from you in writing. Thank you so much. Norway, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Norway takes this opportunity to recognize the contributions we have heard so far from the panel of experts, the contribution of the IAFB, as well as the rich exchange between parties we have heard so far, including from the EU and Argentina. We also welcome the proposed decision. Now, in response to the 4 questions before us in this in-depth dialogue, Norway thinks these are best illustrated by a couple of statements from the Sami Parliament in Norway. Those highlight the importance of maintaining traditional livelihoods and the involvement of traditional knowledge in the management of biodiversity. So, Sami livelihoods are important carriers of Sami languages, Sami culture and societal life. Within reindeer herding, fisheries, agriculture, and the use of common property lands, there is a rich, living, and diverse language covering specific terminologies. A large part of this terminology is specific to these livelihoods and form part of a Sami traditional knowledge. With societal change happening at a fast pace, this has an impact also on Sami livelihoods. Language carriers in traditional Sami livelihoods contain important knowledge about Sami languages, traditions, and values. Sami languages have traditionally held a strong position, especially within these primary livelihoods, and conversely, these livelihoods have played important roles as carriers of Sami languages and transmission of traditional knowledge across generations. The functions of traditional Sami livelihoods as carriers, transmitters, and arenas for learning and maintenance of Sami languages must therefore be strengthened. Traditional Sami livelihoods represent a life form based on strong cultural elements, including family, kinship, and descent. These livelihoods serve to maintain Sami languages, values, and traditions, and to maintain, develop, and transmit traditional knowledge. More specifically, reindeer herding is one of the most important carriers of Sami languages. The South Sami language, one of 6, is particularly exposed to the societal and cultural change we have heard about and has been placed on UNESCO's list of languages threatened with extinction. Continued reindeer herding in the South Sami areas, therefore, is of particular importance to maintain the South Sami language and culture. The Sami Parliament would like to underline the importance that language carriers in Sami livelihoods are used actively to maintain Sami languages in both formal and informal arenas. This applies in particular with regard to Sami kindergartens, primary schools, and educational guidance and materials. The Sami Parliament also wants to draw attention to the need to give visibility, use, and implementation of Sami traditional knowledge in the institutions and practices of nature management, including in national implementation of the new Global Biodiversity Framework. This should happen in close cooperation with Sami institutions for maintenance of traditional knowledge, Sami communities, and rights holders. The Sami Parliament therefore expects to see improved status of Sami traditional knowledge and improved practices with regard to taking account of indigenous peoples' traditional knowledge in decision-making within management of biodiversity. In this area too, there is need to identify ways and institutions to transmit knowledge from generation to generation so that Sami traditional knowledge is maintained as a living repository for a changing world. While the Norwegian delegation does not, of course, speak on behalf of the Sami Parliament, we do take this opportunity to thank them for the opportunity to present their views on the importance of maintaining traditional livelihoods and involvement of traditional knowledge in the management of biodiversity as ways to ensure transmission of traditional knowledge, innovations, and practices between generations. Norway, on its own behalf, is in the process of updating our National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan in response to the new Global Biodiversity Framework. We are in dialogue with the Sami Parliament to ensure their full and effective participation in this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement, Norway, and for communicating the messages from the Sami Parliament. Egypt, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I would like to join all of the previous speakers who thanked the Secretariat for preparation of such important dialogue, which is very rich with many things. Having said that, I have 3 major clarifications that I'm asking the experts. Number 1, as we know, languages are means of communication. Communication between ourselves and nature in some way or another. How the languages are related to the religions. In our religion, for example, all what is already said this morning are in our religion, Islam and Quran, everything that you may think about, that you cannot believe. It is very clear, everything is stated very clear in religion. So language and communication, language and religion. Second question is, how can you sustain this traditional knowledge against what is happening now. I'm referring to globalization. Globalization makes it very, very difficult for young generation to cope with languages. Number three, what's the relations between the traditional knowledge and innovation? How can we innovate this traditional knowledge in a way that they can implement much better in GBF and many, many other programs? Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Egypt, for those questions. Thank you. We'll try to get back to the panel for those questions. I now will give the floor to New Zealand. New Zealand, please.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the first time New Zealand has taken the floor, we would like to thank the Swiss government for hosting us this week, as well as the Secretariat for the preparatory work. We acknowledge the importance of the focus topic of the in-depth dialogue, and we thank the panelists for the excellent presentations on the focus topic. Chair, the Indigenous language of Aotearoa New Zealand is a precious treasure and integral to the stewardship of land, oceans, and resources by reflecting the relationship between Māori, the Indigenous peoples of New Zealand, and the natural world. The rights of Māori and the obligations of the New Zealand government are set out in Article 2 of the Treaty of Waitangi, which guarantees Māori the right to exercise their exclusive chieftainship over their land, homes, and their treasures. We see in the summary of submissions that language revitalization is essential for the intergenerational transmission of traditional knowledge, and note the relevance for the implementation of national biodiversity strategies and plans. Chair, it is vital to ensure the use of traditional knowledge of Indigenous peoples is subject to their free, prior, and informed consent. It is also important to ensure that the holders of traditional knowledge are the decision makers, especially in relation to language revitalization. To that end, we are supportive of the proposal made by IFB, in particular in relation to the third preambular paragraph. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very, very much, New Zealand, and noted your support for those parts of the proposal of the IFB. Australia, the floor is yours.
Thank you to our three presenters for sharing their knowledge on this important issue and starting this important exchange of views and experiences from across the world. Australia acknowledges the important role that language plays in the transmission of traditional knowledge over generations, that language and traditional knowledge are indivisible, and that language and traditional knowledge play a critical role in the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework and delivering on the objectives of the Convention. We also acknowledge UNESCO's work as the lead agency on initiatives to preserve, revitalise and promote Indigenous languages. Language is not limited to words conveyed by speech. It has a human regenerative function. It extends to listening to the purposeful voice of the land and its attributes. Australia further acknowledges the role of the songlines that form the narrative of Australian Indigenous cultures and the enactment of these as vehicles for the practice and preservation of traditional knowledge of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait peoples. Songlines can define the land that Indigenous people live on, linking locations in vast landscapes with memory, creating spoken knowledge systems. With the displacement of Indigenous peoples from their ancestral lands, many of these systems have become vulnerable, damaged, or lost. We must work to counter this. Australia's Indigenous protected areas are areas of land and sea that Australia's Indigenous peoples have agreed to manage for biodiversity conservation. These areas represent 50% of Australia's protected areas network. The Australian government is providing $231.5 million over 5 years from July this year to continue and to improve the Indigenous Protected Areas program. Australia's Indigenous Ranger Program supports Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders to apply traditional knowledge in land management and promote the passing of knowledge from community elders to the younger generations. Combined, these programs have demonstrated invaluable social and environmental outcomes. For example, the reciprocal relationship with Indigenous peoples and their land is demonstrated in traditional land and fire management, which has seen the restoration of native plants and animals that were thought to have been lost. An evaluation is currently underway to assess the extent to which the IPA program objectives are being achieved, and Australia looks forward to sharing these lessons moving forward. Australia supports the draft recommendations with one suggested amendment to recommendation 1 to, put this into context of the scope of the convention, and we will submit this proposed text change in writing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Australia, for your comments, for your examples of work in your territories. I give the floor to Chad now. Chad, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, de m'avoir accordé la parole. Je tiens d'abord à féliciter le secrétariat pour ce grand travail abattu. Je remercie également les différents intervenants pour avoir donné des informations riches, surtout les liens qu'ils ont bien su faire entre les langues autochtones et la préservation de la biodiversité. Bien, au Tchad, les langues autochtones ont été toujours considérées comme un véhicule de transmission des savoirs et des valeurs. Vu les différentes déclarations, il n'y a aucun doute aujourd'hui que les langues autochtones jouent un rôle important dans la préservation de la biodiversité. J'aimerais attirer l'attention sur la bande sahélo-saharienne qui connaît des difficultés énormes dans la préservation de la biodiversité face au changement climatique. Or, il existe dans cette bande sahélo-saharienne des peuples autochtones avec des connaissances séculaires à valoriser. Je voudrais remercier également le docteur Mohamed Hamdan d'avoir parlé du peuple Mbororo du Tchad qui ont des connaissances séculaires et qu'ils transmettent de génération en génération, auxquels je voudrais ajouter le peuple Gouran et le peuple arabe nomade qui ne sont pas du reste. J'aimerais poser une question. Est-ce que aujourd'hui nous avons déjà répertorié tous les peuples autochtones du monde? Pour finir, le Tchad soutient la déclaration faite par le peuple autochtone. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very, very much, Chad. Thank you for your comments and your questions to the panel. The Dominican Republic, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente. Dando voz a quienes viven en armonía con la naturaleza. Realmente hoy, representando a la República Dominicana y como miembro activo de CRULAC, me presento ante esta distinguida asamblea para resaltar el imperativo crítico de la conservación de la biodiversidad, no solo como un mandato universal, sino como un compromiso inherente para el futuro de nuestra vibrante región caribeña. En la República Dominicana entendemos profundamente que la biodiversidad es más que un activo ecológico. Es la piedra angular de nuestro patrimonio cultural y la esencia misma de nuestra resiliencia ecológica. Nuestros ecosistemas, sin par, desde las majestuosas alturas del Pico Duarte, el pico más alto del Caribe, hasta las ricas profundidades del Mar Caribe, no son solo recursos naturales, son tesoros globales que estamos dedicados a preservar para nosotros y para el mundo. Por lo tanto, abogamos fervientemente por la participación completa e integral de los pueblos indígenas y las comunidades locales en cada aspecto de la toma de decisiones relacionadas con la biodiversidad. Reconocemos que las mujeres y las niñas indígenas, a menudo las custodias de nuestra sabiduría ancestral, deben liderar este diálogo. Su perspicacia ancestral es primordial para enfrentar los desafíos actuales de conservación y la utilización sostenible de nuestros dones naturales. Llamamos a una amplificación del diálogo y a la colaboración de todos los grupos de trabajo y entidades involucradas, particularmente en facilitar el intercambio de conocimientos y prácticas para una implementación efectiva a nivel de base. La República Dominicana reconoce una oportunidad invaluable en entrelazar indicadores de conocimiento tradicional en el marco del monitoreo de las GBF, capturando así nuestros esfuerzos y progresos de manera más precisa y significativa. Además, subrayamos la necesidad de movilizar y aumentar sustancialmente los recursos financieros. Es crucial que los pueblos indígenas y las comunidades locales, especialmente nuestras mujeres y jóvenes, tengan acceso sin obstáculos a estos fondos, reforzando su papel indispensable en la custodia de la biodiversidad. Finalmente, reflejando nuestro etos regional, abogamos por asignar el 20% del Fondo del Marco Mundial de la Biodiversidad de los Pueblos Indígenas y las comunidades locales. Esto no es simplemente un gesto de apoyo, sino un testimonio de su papel crucial en salvaguardar ese patrimonio natural que es el sustento de nuestra región y de nuestro planeta. Además, la República Dominicana está apasionadamente comprometida con la integración del saber ancestral de nuestras comunidades locales en el tejido de nuestra región, de nuestra gestión de la biodiversidad. Reconocemos este conocimiento como una herramienta invaluable para iluminar y empoderar a nuestras futuras generaciones. Nuestra visión es incrustar la sostenibilidad en el ADN de nuestra cultura nacional, evolucionando como un legado de respeto y armonía con la naturaleza para las gestiones futuras. La República Dominicana se compromete a trabajar incansablemente junto a GRULAC y la comunidad global para asegurar un futuro donde la biodiversidad prospere, en beneficio de las generaciones presentes y futuras. Agradecemos al gobierno de Suiza y al convenio completo por esta importante iniciativa de dar voz a quien realmente protege la biodiversidad. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very, very much, Dominican Republic. Thank you. Côte d'Ivoire, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Secrétaire. La Côte d'Ivoire voudrait bien saluer tout le parterre et remercier les intervenants pour leurs différentes propositions. Monsieur le Secrétaire, nul doute que nos langues sont des vecteurs de transmission des connaissances pour la préservation de nos héritages, nos patrimoines culturels. Tout le monde le reconnaît. Nous-mêmes, nous avons vécu dans cette atmosphère, dans ce climat où nos parents nous ont transmis nos langues. Mais aujourd'hui, le monde planétaire nous conduit à des brassages de cultures, de langues qui, au moment où ces brassages doivent constituer des brassages de diversité, c'est le contraire que nous observons. Nos langues sont de moins en moins apprises, maîtrisées par nos enfants, nos générations actuelles et futures. Les générations sont de moins en moins enclins à parler nos langues. Et vous êtes d'accord avec moi sur ce fait. Alors, la question que je me pose est la suivante. Les propositions qui ont été faites, à savoir d'identifier ces langues, ces connaissances, nous sommes d'accord. Mais est-ce que c'est suffisant pour que nous puissions amener nos générations présentes et futures à mieux s'approprier ces langues-là, qui sont des outils qui nous permettent de maîtriser certaines pratiques. Aujourd'hui, quelles sont les stratégies que nous proposons pour la transmission? Oui, je reviens sur ça, la transmission. Une meilleure appropriation de ces langues-là. Voilà la préoccupation que je pose. Comment faire en sorte que ces langues qui seront identifiées puissent être maîtrisées et transmises à nos générations. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Before I turn to the next statement, I just want to ask for further interventions. Try to keep them shorter because I still have many interventions. We want to hear back from the panel as well. So please try to keep your statements short. I now turn to Uganda. Uganda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for your able management of the session and the CBD Secretariat for all the preparatory work. I also want to thank the government of Switzerland for hosting us here this week. Indeed, languages provide identity and medium of communication and belonging to the different peoples of the world. Uganda recognizes and supports the statement submitted by the IFB for consideration by COP16. We would, however, like to propose that the statement takes due cognizance and indeed includes local languages as used by local communities as well as the indigenous languages. We would like to thank the experts who provided great insight and experience on the importance and use of indigenous and I add local languages. I have a question for the experts, but I noticed that Brazil has presented some good solutions to the problem of erosion of these indigenous and local languages. I also note that Egypt had the same concern like Uganda has, but I just want to ask the experts to, again, try to throw more light on the threat of erosion of these indigenous and local languages, especially in light of factors such as urbanization and modern education. Knowing that many countries have legislated for the preservation of these languages, but if the experts could throw more light on what else can be done to ensure that these local and indigenous languages can be preserved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Uganda. Thank you for your question that we'll also try to get answers from the panel. Benin, you have the floor.
Le Bénin voudrait remercier la Suisse, remercier le secrétariat, remercier les initiateurs donc, de cette rencontre, y compris les communicateurs. Comme vous le savez, le Bénin est un grand pays de la culture vaudou. Et les langues sont tout pour le vaudou. Et il n'y a pas de vaudou sans les langues. Et il n'y a pas de vaudou sans la biodiversité. le vaudou est essentiellement lié à l'eau, à la terre, aux arbres et aux animaux. C'est dire que le vaudou est essentiellement lié à la biodiversité et que donc, au centre de tous ces éléments, il y a les langues. Je ne pourrais donc pas, au nom du Bénin, me taire sur cette problématique. C'est clair que si nous perdons notre langue, nous avons tout perdu. Dans nos pays sans écriture, si nous voulons préserver nos connaissances traditionnelles et donc la biodiversité, il faut travailler pour préserver les langues. La cible 19 du cadre mondial sur la biodiversité est une avancée, mais la problématique qui se pose est de savoir comment mieux pérenniser les langues au profit des connaissances traditionnelles. C'est pour cela que le Bénin soutient donc toute solution qui travaille pour la pérennisation des langues, pour une meilleure transmission des connaissances traditionnelles. Si notre rencontre peut donc aboutir à un ensemble de solutions concrètes qui vont aider pour la pérennisation des langues au profit des connaissances traditionnelles, notre rencontre aurait été une très grande réussite. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Benin, for your statement here. Before we go to the next statement, I just want to remind delegates that we haven't had very many of these statements loaded yet, so please ensure to try to load your statements really within the next hour so we can work on the report. Thank you very much. I give the floor to Colombia.
Gracias. Muchísimas gracias por permitirme hacer uso de la palabra. Colombia agradece a los copresidentes de este grupo de trabajo sobre 8J por su compromiso con estos temas. También agradecemos al gobierno de Suiza y a la Secretaría por la organización de esta reunión. Igualmente un agradecimiento al hermoso discurso de apertura y a los 3 ponentes de este tema por compartir elementos fundamentales para el mantenimiento de las lenguas tradicionales con el fin de asegurar la transmisión del conocimiento tradicional. Colombia cuenta con más de 80 lenguas, de las cuales hemos perdido cerca del 30%, por lo que reconocemos la importancia de las lenguas en la transmisión intergeneracional de conocimientos tradicionales, innovaciones y prácticas, y en particular el papel de las mujeres en esta labor. En este sentido, Colombia recomienda la inclusión en los antecedentes y fundamentos de los siguientes instrumentos internacionales. Primero, el Convenio sobre Protección de Expresiones Culturales de la UNESCO del 2005. Adicionalmente, y como parte de la estrategia para revitalizar y promover las lenguas, queremos incluir en los antecedentes la creación del Instituto Iberoamericano de Lenguas Indígenas, aprobado en la Cumbre de Jefes de Estado y de Gobierno en Andorra en su sesión del 2022, y de la cual Colombia tendrá el honor de presidir a partir del año 2024 por un periodo de 2 años. Esto como una buena práctica para la implementación del Plan Decenal de Lenguas a nivel global, el cual incluye esa revitalización cultural y lingüística que ya varios han hablado acá, y en el caso de Colombia, en especial de todas las lenguas nativas habladas por pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales, de acuerdo al Plan Decenal Nacional, aprobado y en inicio de implementación a nivel local. También consideramos importante recomendar el fomento del diálogo en todos los espacios del convenio. Este diálogo de saberes e interculturalidad, el diálogo intercientífico entre los pueblos indígenas, las comunidades locales, las organizaciones y otras partes. Esto implica arreglos institucionales que se pueden trabajar con el apoyo de organismos e instituciones especializadas como la UNESCO o el Instituto Iberoamericano de Lenguas Indígenas. Finalmente, apoyamos a otros en sus intervenciones al mencionar la necesidad de brindar los medios de implementación y en particular el financiamiento para el mantenimiento de las lenguas y los territorios de pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales que permitirán la pervivencia de los pueblos y, por lo tanto, el mantenimiento de sus conocimientos tradicionales. Finalmente, queremos manifestar el apoyo a la declaración que ha hecho el Foro de Pueblos Indígenas. Muchas gracias.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks. Your support to the IFB is noted, and also your comment about financing as well. The floor to Canada. Canada, please.
Thank you, Secretariat. Canada has taken important steps in support of Indigenous languages. In June 2019, the Indigenous Language Act received royal assent. The overall purpose of the Indigenous Language Act is to support the efforts of Indigenous peoples to reclaim, revitalize, maintain, and strengthen Indigenous languages. Among other things, the Act created an Office of the Commissioner of Indigenous Language and works to establish measures to facilitate the provision of adequate, sustainable, and long-term funding. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Canada, for that efficient and brief statement. Thank you very much. Nigeria, you have the floor now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to thank previous speakers and experts for their rich presentation, and also appreciate the government of Switzerland for hosting this event. Nigeria fully acknowledges the role of indigenous languages in the intergenerational transmission of traditional knowledge, innovations, and practices among indigenous peoples and local communities. As such, we have been incorporating as appropriate and revitalization of indigenous languages, given the fundamental role in the intergenerational transmission of traditional knowledge, in the implementation of CBD and Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, including updating and revision of our national biodiversity strategies and action plans, and the preparation of our 7th and subsequent national reports. There are a catalog of rich and meaningful knowledge with our indigenous people that we should take advantage of, especially in conservation, preservation, and management of our biodiversity. Their inputs and integration from planning to execution of programs must not be downplayed. Our ability to tap into their knowledge and build on what they have will determine to a large extent the successes that will be recorded in the implementation of GBF, and this cannot be achieved without the preservation of indigenous language. In Nigeria, we have over 500 languages, and indeed, for any intervention to be owned, accepted, and sustained must be communicated in indigenous language. Often, programs adopt the use of community-driven development through local governments that are often members of indigenous people and will lead any deliberations for acceptance. With the special role of indigenous people and local communities, we propose that strategies for mobilizing resources to ensure direct access to funding by indigenous people and local communities to support the implementation of Kunming-Montreal GBF. And also, we want to advocate for the modification of the next in-depth dialogue to be resource mobilization to support the implementation of Kunming-Montreal GBF by indigenous peoples and for indigenous peoples and local communities. At this juncture, let me express our support for the submission or intervention of international indigenous people, and that we support all the proposals submitted by them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nigeria. Your support to the statement of IFB is noted, and also is noted your recommendation with regard to the theme of the next dialogue. So it'd be good if we could get your statement submitted for that. Thank you very, very much. Saudi Arabia, you have the floor.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. ربما ليس لدينا إضافة فوق ما تفضلت به الدول المشاركة، لكننا نود أن ننتهز هذه الفرصة لنوجه الشكر الجزيل إلى جميع القائمين على هذا الموضوع وعلى الاهتمام بجميع عناصر هذا الموضوع: الشعوب الأصلية، المجتمعات المحلية، المعارف التقليدية، اللغة. ربما لا توجد لدينا في المملكة العربية السعودية لغة أخرى خلاف اللغة العربية، لكننا بالفعل لدى المجتمعات المحلية مصطلحات ومفردات خاصة نستطيع بطريقة أو بأخرى اعتبارها لغة خاصة وفريدة، تحمل في طياتها رصيدا من الإرث الثقافي والمعارف التقليدية ذات العلاقة بالتنوع البيولوجي، والتي من الضروري الحفاظ عليها لتعزيز الحفاظ على التنوع البيولوجي. حالياً توجد لدى وزارة الثقافة بالمملكة العربية السعودية العديد من المبادرات والبرامج التي تصب في الحفاظ على المعارف التقليدية والعناصر الثقافية. شكراً سيد الرئيس.
Thank you very, very much, Saudi Arabia, for your very efficient statement. Thank you indeed. Thank you indeed. The floor goes to Indonesia now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving Indonesia the floor. As this is the first time Indonesia takes the floor, Indonesia would like to thank the government of Switzerland for hosting our meeting and commend the Secretariat for the excellent preparation. On this agenda, as Indonesia herself has 733 local languages, Indonesia acknowledged the very importance of local languages in the intergenerational transmission of traditional knowledge, innovations, and practices among local communities, and more broadly, the links between biological and cultural diversity. Therefore, Indonesia fully supports the current draft recommendation on the issue for the next COP. We have also heard that there are new proposed additions to the draft recommendation. Hence, Indonesia stands ready to consider these proposed revisions during our meeting this week. In that regard, as we believe it was also stated and proposed by the esteemed delegate of Uganda, Indonesia also proposed to add local languages in paragraph 1 and 2 of the recommendation for consistency purposes with the prior paragraph. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very, very much, Indonesia. Your recommendation on the text is indeed noted. I give the floor to Japan. Japan, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Japan would like to express its appreciation to the panel experts for excellent statements, knowledge, and wisdom on the importance of the linguistic biodiversity. We would like to also thank Government of Switzerland for hosting the meeting and for the Secretariat for preparing the program and document. Japan would like to share our views on this matter. Regarding the linguistic diversity, although we have no doubt about the importance of indigenous and national languages, I found myself in a rather strange position in this discussion. In our country, most of the people speak the same language, Japanese. Japanese language has been developed and evolved closely with nature through long history. So we'd like to ask panel members, panel experts, how we should consider the linguistic diversity in such context. I believe this will help us and other parties in similar situations to accommodate the concept into our national context. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Japan. And the panelists will give them a bit of time to manage that as well. Thanks so much. I give the floor to Namibia now. Namibia.
Thank you, Chair. Languages are a vital part of existence of our team of indigenous people and communities. Namibia would like to align itself with the intervention made by Uganda on issues of adding local languages to our text. Namibia has a considerable number of indigenous people and local communities living in our territory as citizens. The majority of these people are San, but there are also other groups. Therefore, Namibia has various obligations toward these indigenous peoples, local communities, and the duty to protect and respect their rights. It is a party to various international and regional legal instruments that protect the rights of these communities. Namibia has made some commendable effort through its constitution and legislations to ensure that the rights of these people are respected and protected. At a practical level, Namibia has dealt with issues of discrimination against such communities by introducing development programs. And furthermore, Namibia's educational language policy provides that indigenous people and local communities and their children are instructed in languages, in their languages for the first 3 years before changing to English as an official language. However, the practical implementation of these policies remain fraught with various challenges. With that said, Mr. Chair, we suggest that on this agenda item, where we speak of indigenous languages, we want to emphasize that it is important that we make reference to indigenous languages and also include local languages as appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Namibia. Your recommendation is indeed noted. So that is all the speakers we have from parties. I have 2 more speakers coming up. I'm going to ask each of you, 3 speakers now. I'm going to ask you to be very, very brief because we want to have time for our panelists to respond in some way to the many questions we had and then to go back to the co-chair. So first I'm going to start with, women. You have the floor.
Thank you, co-chair. My name is Amelia Arreguin, speaking on behalf of the Women's Caucus. Underscoring the point that diverse languages and knowledge systems reflect the strong and collective relations of indigenous and local communities, including indigenous and local women, with nature and cultural values that uphold conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, and further affirming that indigenous and local women play a critical role in the protection, conservation, and transmission of indigenous and local languages, as clearly and strongly stated during the international dialogue on the implementation of the GBF and the Gender Plan of Action celebrated the last 2 days, we proposed the following concrete edits in the recommendation sections of the document. First of all, in the paragraph starting with also noting, to include indigenous and local women. To add a new paragraph giving a reference to targets 22, 23, and the Gender Plan of Action, in particular the paragraph 2E of the Gender Plan of Action, that highly stress the importance of women and girls from indigenous peoples and local communities, their rights, their language, and their traditions. In the paragraph starting with recognizing that the contribution of indigenous, to add the reference to local languages, as many other colleagues have already requested. In the paragraph starting with also recognizing that diverse languages and knowledges, to add the insertion, systems reflect the strong and collective relations of indigenous and local communities, including indigenous and local women with nature and cultural values that uphold conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, and hence, and then delete can. And instead of referring to current disturbances, as the Secretary of the Convention and many other spaces, we have heard that we are not living or facing current disturbances, but current crises. And in the recommendations, to refer again to local languages as well as indigenous languages, to recognize the role of indigenous and local women and youth. In paragraph 2, to add the insertion of women and youth and other relevant stakeholders. And in the proposal for the next in-depth dialogue, that as well or in parallel of discussing direct access to funding, there are other means of implementations that are equally important, as including capacity building, development, and technical support for IPLCs, but also for women and youth. And finally, a reference to financial transparency and accountability from donors and implementation agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, women. Before I go to, we have another party, but I'd like the parties to, before we close the session, if there will be support for the proposals from women. Thanks very much. Okay, so I have two more parties for the floor as well as the other ones. So we're starting to run out of time, colleagues. Just letting you know. Just letting you know. Sorry, I have a hand from Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, Trinidad and Tobago, please.
Support for
support. Thank you very much, Trinidad and Tobago. So Trinidad and Tobago supports the State for Women. Much appreciated. I'm going to turn to India now. India, please, very briefly if you can. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chair, Co-Chair, and the Secretariat for giving me this opportunity. I also thank the Swiss government for hosting this. My special thanks to the panel of experts. And they express their wisdom through their own language, and also the other countries they spoke before me. India is also known for its incredible linguistic diversity. It is home for more than 1,600 languages spoken. And forget about the innumerable dialects which are there. And in case of India, it is, having too many number of language. It is not only a matter of pride, but it holds immense cultural and historical significance. And this is the mother tongue through which the knowledge, particularly, we are more concerned about the biodiversity, which is, transmitted from generation to generation. So the preservation of language is crucial for maintaining cultural identity, promotional multilingualism, and also for preserving the traditional knowledges. So, linguistic diversity is always a testament to the rich tapestry of our culture and traditions that exist. And it is also, very fascinating to see how language shapes the identity of different communities, with each language conveying a unique set of values, beliefs, and customs. We have, like local communities, there are more than 645 distinct tribals in our country. As many of our previous speakers spoke, many of the languages are also in the endangerment and extinction. As per our UNESCO, we all know that if a language is spoken by less than 10,000, it is considered to be endangered. So in India, we have, say, official language policies are there. Through Constitution, it has recognized more than 22 languages. And in case of India, it included NGOs, non-governmental organizations, in preserving various local communities, tribal languages. Many of these languages are also in our schedule, in the constitutional thing. And as previous speakers said, dominance of major languages, migration and urbanizations are we consider as some of the threat. Even lack of awareness also. And in case of India, it has established various language academies, and many states within India, they also tried mother tongue-based multilingual learning. That is also helped in preservation of the languages, and also. In case of India, in order to preserve this traditional rich knowledges, traditional knowledge digital library was created, and which has more than 450,000 medicinal formulations are already in codified form. Apart from that, India has also taken the initiative of People Biodiversity Register. In case of India, more than 270,000 People Biodiversity Registers are there. And India has created biodiversity management committees at grassroots level, and each biodiversity management committee, they are able to make people biodiversity register to register various, rich biodiversity. And through this forum, India is in the process of revising, updating its NBSAP, And through its national and regional consultations, it is doing that. And it is also including the local communities for considering their use. And we will be learning a lot from this dialogue. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for that, all those different examples from India. Very good. Madagascar, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup de nous avoir donné la parole. Je vais essayer d'être bref. Tout d'abord, nous tenons à féliciter le secrétariat pour les travaux fournis et j'aimerais rejoindre ce que l'Inde avait dit tout à l'heure, qu'il faudrait souligner le rôle de l'éducation dans la préservation des langues, dans la transmission intergénérationnelle des connaissances, innovations et pratiques traditionnelles. Ainsi, des financements devraient être mobilisés pour promouvoir l'éducation formelle et non formelle pour transmettre les langues autochtones à travers des outils et des matériels canaux adéquats pour chaque localité. Merci.
Thank you very much, and thank you much for being very brief. We now turn to youth. Youth, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. We express our gratitude to the panelists for sharing their wisdom on a very important topic. We also support the statement delivered by the IIFB. For many indigenous youth around the world, the disappearance of our languages in parallel with the continued plunder of the biodiversity in our lands and territories are compounded existential threats. The loss of languages and the loss of nature are two issues that are inextricably linked. One accelerates the other and vice versa. The effect of this loss of language and biodiversity for many indigenous youth is to see the loss of the vitality of our lands and waters, and at the same time, one of our strongest ways to stay connected to it. Moreover, being unable to speak our indigenous language, despite having systemic causes, creates shame and blame for many indigenous youth and can cause detachment from our community and a loss of sense of indigenous pride and identity. With regards to the Global Biodiversity Framework, Section K and Section C emphasize the importance of transformative education on biodiversity that recognize diverse worldviews, values, and knowledge systems of indigenous peoples and local communities. For the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, a transformative education is culture-rooted and supports the transmission of indigenous and local knowledge and languages. Direct learning by indigenous youth through practice, guided by our elders, must be recognized and supported as a fundamental element to the transmission process. Through our network's global consultation process, our community has also expressed that the guidance and teachings of indigenous wisdom are critical for transformative change and for living in harmony with nature. Therefore, ensuring the revitalization of indigenous languages, knowledge, and practices will be essential towards repairing our connection to nature and articulating and realizing our visions for a good life. This is relevant for the whole of humanity. Finally, it must be made extremely clear that the root causes of the loss of nature and our culture are inextricably linked, and they must be addressed together. We must take a holistic approach to addressing the loss of both if we are to live in harmony with nature. Thank you again, Chair, for the space to contribute to this important dialogue.
Great. Thank you very much, Global Youth Biodiversity Network. I have another party. I have Algeria that wishes to take the floor. Algeria, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, de m'avoir donné la parole. Donc, je remercie le secrétariat de la Convention pour la préparation des documents et le gouvernement suisse d'avoir abrité cette réunion. Donc, en Algérie, l'arabe est la langue officielle. Il y a aussi le tamazight qui est devenu également la langue nationale et officielle. Donc, l'État algérien œuvre à la promotion de la langue tamazight et à son développement dans toutes ses variétés linguistiques en usage sur le territoire national. Le tamazight connaît donc une évolution dans l'espace public, notamment dans les médias publics. Il y a eu aussi un prix du président de la République, la littérature et la langue amazight. Des enseignants donc, ont été également formés, diplômés de l'école normale supérieure, qui enseignent donc au palier primaire, secondaire. Donc l'enseignement de la langue Temesir pourrait transmettre dans les connaissances sur la diversité biologique et préserver donc la biodiversité. Merci.
Thank you, Algeria. I'm going to now turn the floor to IPLC 16. Please, if you could keep your remarks to just a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Más que nada, felicitar a la hermana por su designación como copresidenta y hablo a nombre de la Red de Mujeres Indígenas sobre Biodiversidad de América Latina y el Caribe. Soy Florina López, del pueblo Cuna. Comienzo agradeciendo a los diferentes países que contribuyeron al Fondo Voluntario, a la participación de los representantes de los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales en esta reunión. En relación al tema 3 de la agenda provisional referente al papel de las lenguas indígenas en la transmisión intergeneracional de los conocimientos tradicionales, prácticas e innovaciones, los textos expresados por el Foro Internacional Indígena sobre Biodiversidad la apoyamos en todo su contenido, que está considerando las reuniones de esta 12ª reunión del Grupo de Trabajo Ad Hoc de Composición Abierta en 3 sesiones sobre el artículo 8J y disposiciones conexas del Convenio sobre la Diversidad Biológica y del Marco Mundial Cumin-Montreal. Reconoce las importantes funciones y contribuciones de los pueblos indígenas y las comunidades locales como custodios de la diversidad biológica, sus derechos, conocimientos, incluidos los conocimientos tradicionales asociados con la diversidad biológica, innovaciones y visiones del mundo, valores y prácticas. Reconoce además el importante papel de las mujeres y hermanas mayores indígenas en la enseñanza y transmisión de lenguas, culturas, conocimientos, prácticas e innovaciones. Reconoce el vínculo entre la tenencia segura de la tierra, territorios y aguas para el desarrollo de las lenguas indígenas y la diversidad cultural, aspectos que permiten abordar la pérdida de la biodiversidad global y que son necesarios para lograr la visión de 2050, en vivir en armonía con la naturaleza. Toma en cuenta el proceso de desarrollo de un nuevo programa de trabajo y arreglos institucionales sobre el artículo 8J y otras disposiciones del convenio relacionado con los pueblos indígenas y las comunidades locales. Programas y actividades que se desarrollan durante el Decenio Internacional de las Lenguas Indígenas, decenio que fue proclamada por la Asamblea General de las Naciones Unidas en el año 2019. Muchísimas gracias por la palabra del señor presidente.
Thank you very much for your brief statement. The last speaker today, NGO22. Go ahead, you have the floor.
Runasime Rimakuhmekane Taita, mucho gusto y muchísimas gracias por esta oportunidad. Y sumándome a las declaraciones e intervenciones propositivas tanto de estados como de los pueblos indígenas, quisiera yo llamar la atención de las distinguidas personalidades presentes sobre los desafíos que tenemos para que las lenguas y las culturas se mantengan. Y esto tiene que ver con el espacio donde se debe garantizar la vida de las lenguas, las culturas y de las personas. Y ahí el primer derecho son los derechos territoriales, los derechos a seguir conservando los recursos naturales de nuestro entorno. Y me alegra muchísimo escuchar a la juventud en su preocupación relacionando lengua y cultura y las nuevas generaciones en lo que debe tener como contenido la currícula educativa en nuestros países. La interrelación de lengua, cultura, conocimientos y también la producción de alimentos y las plantas para la salud son indispensables. Muchísimas gracias por esta oportunidad y yo creo que las recomendaciones que se están haciendo de mirar más holísticamente los componentes y los aspectos relacionados a la recuperación, fortalecimiento, proyección con la tecnología y las lenguas y culturas pasa a ser también un gran desafío tanto para nosotros, los pueblos indígenas, como para los estados. Muchísimas gracias.
Great, thank you very, very much. Thank you so much. We are a bit over time, but I'm going to give our panelists each just a couple of minutes to maybe address some of the main questions. I think in general, some of the questions we heard are a bit of a reiteration of what are the main threats, and then also some of the mechanisms that we can be using to preserve. So I'll just go across and I will ask our panelists for a couple of minutes. So we'll start with you.
Muchas gracias a todas las intervenciones. Estaba demostrado con tanto entusiasmo la importancia del tema. Yo quiero tomar algunas de las preguntas porque no alcanzaré a todas. La primera tiene que ver sobre las amenazas a los idiomas de los pueblos indígenas. Creo que adicional a las tradicionales amenazas que se ciernen sobre los territorios indígenas, la falta de su titularidad, el incremento de la criminalización en algunas regiones más que en otras, actualmente tenemos los riesgos de políticas orientadas hacia la transición energética, economías verdes y otras tendencias que pueden tener muy buenas intenciones para generar energías bajas en emisiones. Si no toman en cuenta la perspectiva de los pueblos indígenas, pueden incrementar su vulnerabilidad. Adicionalmente, los procesos de migración que se están acelerando en distintas partes del mundo están incrementando la vulnerabilidad de los idiomas de los pueblos indígenas en contextos distintos a sus propios orígenes y, adicionalmente, como lo dijimos en nuestra intervención, el incremento de los discursos de odios en distintos medios corporativos de comunicación que generalmente lo disfrazan de libertad de prensa o de opinión, sin que esto tenga una respuesta institucional, cierne un enorme riesgo para la utilización de los idiomas de los pueblos indígenas en distintos contextos. Ahora, sobre la pregunta de qué hacer, cómo facilitar la protección de los idiomas de los pueblos indígenas, pienso que hay varios niveles. El nivel internacional, sin duda, puede ser un punto de partida y aquí se han dado muchas claves, pero a nivel nacional, aumentar la perspectiva integral de los sistemas educativos es fundamental. Esto incluye la necesidad de apoyar con mayor financiamiento los sistemas educativos de los pueblos indígenas y en el nivel internacional, sin duda, aumentar la participación de los pueblos indígenas en la toma de decisiones sobre, por ejemplo, los mecanismos y procedimientos de financiamiento es fundamental. Yo termino diciendo que reconozco el avance que se dio en las discusiones en Brasilia y en Vancouver sobre una asignación específica, por ahora aspiracional, para la financiación a los derechos de los pueblos indígenas, pero esto se debe precisar con mayor interés. Por ejemplo, aumentar la transparencia sobre qué va destinado a pueblos indígenas, qué va destinado a comunidades locales, qué se entiende por instituciones propias, qué se entiende por instituciones financiadoras. Son esfuerzos importantes que debemos agrupar entre todos y unirnos en este noble propósito. Muchas gracias. Tenemos mucho que conversar. Quiero cerrar diciendo que para los pueblos indígenas la mayoría tienen una perspectiva integral y la división entre cultura y naturaleza no es tan fija, de manera que la espiritualidad está en el centro. No necesariamente se habla de religión, pero sí es importante verlo desde esa perspectiva integral y sobre este tema podemos conversar muchísimo en otros escenarios aquí también. Muchas gracias, muy amables.
Great, thank you. Yolanda, for you.
Sí, muchas gracias. Realmente hemos tenido una mañana de rica discusión, hemos escuchado a diferentes hermanos y hermanas. Desde mi experiencia de educadora y como mujer indígena, les invito, es que he escuchado, ¿qué podemos hacer? ¿Por qué no pueden ejercer sus derechos humanos? Tenemos que buscar las causas estructurales. ¿Dónde nacieron esas causas? ¿Dónde están? desde la colonización. No podemos olvidar eso. Dentro de los pueblos indígenas hablamos de traumas generacionales que se transmiten de generación en generación. Yo como educadora cada día tengo que tratar con este tipo de problemas. Tenemos que, por eso hablo del perdón y de la reconciliación, pero de un verdadero perdón, entendiendo lo que es realmente el respeto. Viniendo ya a la parte más moderna, ¿qué pasa con las industrias extractivas cuando hablamos de minería, de tala de árboles? Estamos desapareciendo fauna, flora, sitios sagrados. Estamos desplazando a los hermanos y hermanas indígenas y ese desplazamiento causa dolor, causa pérdida de la cultura. Tienen que moverse a otro lado, a otro sitio, a aprender otro conocimiento y a desaprender su propio conocimiento. Entonces, yo diría que estas nuevas industrias nos llevan tiene un impacto en la salud humana, pero también en la preservación y la destrucción de la madre tierra. Ahora, a mí me ha conmovido la pregunta cuando dijeron, pero ¿cuáles son esas estrategias? Aquí yo voy a hablar como mamá y siguiendo todos los desarrollos científicos que estamos teniendo ahora con relación a las lenguas. Si queremos recuperar las lenguas, no es en la escuela, es desde que el niño o la niña está en el vientre de su mamá. Tenemos que hablarle, para que ese niño, desde que está en gestación, se acostumbre a la musicalidad, a la tonalidad de su lengua materna. Cuando sale ya al mundo externo, reconoce esa musicalidad, va a querer su lengua, va a respetar su cultura. Yo pienso que eso es fundamental. Y también tomar en cuenta que la socialización del niño, del infante, tiene que estar bien unida completamente al uso de las lenguas indígenas. No podemos socializar a un niño quichua, por ejemplo, utilizando castellano. Pero para eso, ¿qué necesitamos? Nosotros mismos, como pueblos indígenas, como mujeres indígenas, respetar, querer, aceptar que somos indígenas y querer todo ese sentimiento, ese complejo cultural de ser indígenas. Aquí estamos hablando de cambiar ese tapete social y cultural con nuevas prácticas, mirar con nuevos ojos lo que somos y lo que tenemos al frente. Ahora también sí quisiera decirles que a nivel de escuela, hablamos mucho, sí, vamos a recuperar las lenguas, hay que crear programas educativos, etcétera, pero también tomar en cuenta que la recuperación de una lengua lleva de 8 a 10 años. Después, tal vez podemos decir, el niño o la niña fluye en la utilización de la lengua. No nos olvidemos, podemos crear políticas lingüísticas, interculturales. Necesitamos fondos, financiamiento para trabajar. Al trabajar en el campo es una inversión mayor de tiempo, porque nosotros queremos trabajar de abajo hacia arriba, no al contrario. Y en este proceso necesitamos más tiempo, necesitamos convivir, estar junto con nuestra gente, entender cuáles son las necesidades y cuáles son las políticas internas, cuáles son las leyes consuetudinarias también que van a regir el uso de la lengua y la práctica de la cultura que van mano a mano. Esa sería mi reflexión, ¿no? Porque son preguntas y claro, me conmueve escuchar que digamos qué recomendaciones vamos a tomar. Vamos a hacer esas recomendaciones desde el lado humano, desde el lado educativo, desde el lado científico, pero todos nosotros tenemos una responsabilidad social y colectiva para trabajar no solamente en las lenguas, sino en la recuperación de los ecosistemas, de la biodiversidad, de la madre tierra, de la Pachamama. Si queremos estar bien todos, entonces todos trabajemos, pero con responsabilidad y también pensando en justicia social, pensando no solamente en quienes estamos ahora aquí, sino, como decimos en el pensamiento indígena, pensar en todas las generaciones que vienen detrás de nosotros y también tener esa responsabilidad social de dejar como herencia una madre tierra que sea sana, para que la gente que viene detrás nuestro no sufra. Ese sería mi pensamiento y ese sería mi aporte. Muchas gracias.
Great, thank you very much, Yolanda. And a few more comments from our last panelist. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je suis très content d'entendre les interventions multiples. Donc, je vais essayer de répondre à 3 questions essentielles. La première, c'est notre ami de la RDC. Je félicite d'abord la RDC pour la loi promulguée récemment en faveur des peuples autochtones. Donc, les principes, les éléments qui menacent les savoirs traditionnels, d'abord, c'est la non-reconnaissance des langues autochtones et on ajoute le changement climatique qui pousse la population à l'immigration et en changeant leur région, elles perdent automatiquement leur langue et leur savoir. Et par conséquent, la communauté internationale va perdre à jamais une partie de sa mémoire. On ne tue pas notre grand-mère. On a toujours besoin de notre grand-mère dans la maison. Donc la deuxième question, je vais répondre en arabe, parce que notre ami, le représentant de l'Égypte, il a fait une relation entre la religion et les langues. وسأجيبه بالعربية لأن لا يمكن ترجمة الآية. الآية تقول: ومن آياته خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف ألسنتكم وألوانكم إن في ذلك لآيات للعالمين. في هذه الآية يصبح الحفاظ على لغة الشعوب الأصلية هي واجب من خلال الصورة التي تقول بأن اختلاف ألسنتكم وألوانكم في ذلك لآية وآية مهمة جدا في هذا المجال. Recommandation. Donc, les savoirs traditionnels ne sont pas indissociables aux langues autochtones. On ne peut pas promouvoir, préserver les savoirs traditionnels sans la reconnaissance des langues autochtones. Je propose de créer un fonds mondial de la promotion des langues autochtones. Ça, c'est très important pour préserver une mémoire de la communauté internationale. Et je recommande à la CBD de continuer ce dialogue et je propose le thème à venir, les expériences réussies de la promotion des langues autochtones. Et cela pour créer une vision claire pour tout le monde qui désire promouvoir leur langue. Et nous avons énormément d'exemples qui sont très réussis concernant les langues autochtones. Nous avons, comme je viens de dire, l'exemple du Maroc et l'exemple de l'Algérie que je connais dans l'Afrique du Nord. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very, very much. I'm going to turn now to the chair to close the panel, and I apologize to our interpreters for the overtime. Thank you.
I would like to thank the expert panelists, distinguished participants, and the Secretariat for this timely dialogue. It is a timely reminder that our negotiations on future work take place during the International Decade for Indigenous Languages and the significance of Indigenous languages for knowledge transmission. As a main agenda item for this meeting is the consideration of a new proposed program of work and institutional arrangements concerning Indigenous peoples and local communities. These panelists have given us some food for thought in order to realize and maximize the contributions of the collective and local actions of Indigenous peoples and local communities to the goals of the Convention and our vision of living in harmony with nature by 2050. As is our usual practice, a summary of the discussions will be annexed to the report on this meeting. The document WG8j-12/2 on the in-depth dialogue on the thematic areas and other cross-cutting issues proposes a draft recommendation. In paragraph 3, which proposes a topic for the in-depth dialogue to be held at the next meeting of the working group. The proposed topic for the next in-depth dialogue is strategies for mobilizing resources to ensure direct access to funding by Indigenous peoples and local communities to support the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. There were proposals from IIFB, which was supported by several parties, and there were also suggestions from some parties to make some amendments while keeping the theme. Also, we have the CBD Women Caucus, which was supported by parties. Thank you. There was a suggestion from one party, Argentina, for a different topic. The co-chairs will consult with Argentina with the help of the Secretariat and will prepare a CRP for this item. Now I'd like to open the floor if there's any further interventions, if any. I think it's time to close, and it's decided. Distinguished delegates, we have completed item 3 of our agenda. Yes. Distinguished delegates, it is now close to 1:30 p.m., and I would like to bring this session to a close for the lunch break. The working group will meet again this afternoon at 3 p.m. After lunch today, representative of the COP presidency will move to the first readings of and item 4 on progress in the implementation of the program of work on Article 8J and the related provisions, and item 6, which relates to the development of the new program of work and institutional arrangements. We invite parties to help with this task by combining their views on agenda items 6 and 4 into one statement as to make a single intervention. Then, if there is time, we will move to item 5 on knowledge management component of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Lastly, I invite everyone to participate in the side events during the lunch break. The topics of side events are closely related to the issues on the agenda and provide an opportunity for all to engage in more in-depth technical discussions. I now close the session of the working group. The working group will meet again after lunch at 3 p.m. Thank you.